Hi there, my name is Maverick Peters. I'm Dr. Scott Peters' oldest son and Ryan Peters' favorite nephew. This video is a journey through time, going all the way back from the 1960s until present day. This video features some of the most influential key figures, wrestlers, and coaches that shape Beachwood Wrestling. Now, this isn't a straight-through watch video. You're not going to sit down and watch it from start to finish unless you have a ton of time to kill. It's actually kind of a long video, so what we've done is we've put the questions, topics that are being addressed on screen so that you could easily navigate to whatever speaker or topic interests you most. Having grown up with the Beachwood wrestling culture, this project has been incredibly meaningful to me. I got to spend countless hours with some of the coolest people in Beachwood wrestling history, hearing their memories, listening to their stories. Let me just say, putting this video together was no small task, but I can assure you it was a total labor of love.
My cousins, the Weisses, wrestled for Shaker Heights. They were very well known, and when I was a little boy, they taught me how to wrestle on their mother's carpeting. And when I was in 10th grade, we had mandatory wrestling in gym class, every boy in the school. And at the end of that, we had a tournament. And I won the heavyweight division of the tournament, pinning everybody, and kind of enjoyed wrestling. Junior year, Marty Axel moved in from Euclid, and he wrestled junior high school at Euclid, and he was a 9th grader. He was going to 10th grade, I was going into 11th grade, and he said, "You guys have a wrestling team?" I said, "You should have a wrestling team, it's fun." So I went to our football coach, Coach Schrock, and I said, "Can we have a wrestling team?" And he said, "Let's talk to the athletic director." He said, "But I don't know anything about wrestling." I said, "All right." Talk to the athletic director. It might have been Herb Smoke at the time. Or maybe it was Schumacher. Schumacher might have been the athletic director. But in any event, I went to him and he said, "Well, we really don't have a wrestling team. We don't have a coach for you." He said, "But I tell you what, if you keep a group of guys together for a year, I'll get you a coach next year." So I got a bunch of guys together in high school, different sizes, different groups, and we had a club, and I basically coached it. And Schrock, who was the football coach, was the official person in charge, but he just came, said hello, and basically I ran the practices and taught the kids the moves that I learned from my cousins, the Weisses. And then we had a couple scrimmages. We went to Chagrin Falls. We had no uniforms. We wore Beachwood t-shirts and sweatpants, and we had our gym shorts over our sweatpants and tennis shoes. I have pictures I can show you. And so the next year, my senior year, they brought in Iammarino to coach us. We had a real coach. You know, they were all my guys, and then so Iammarino comes in. But all the team really wanted to listen to me, so it was a funny situation. He kind of just played with the little guys, like Barry Guinness, the guys that were 100 and 130 and down. Maybe he'd wrestle with them. But he was such a small man. He really, he never rolled around with me or anything. We had our first Beachwood wrestling match in the 65-66 winter at Kenston High School, okay, in front of their assembly. Now, we were a bunch of kids who had never wrestled before, okay? And Iammarino knew the coach at Kenston, so they had this arranged. And it was very interesting there. They were booing us, and there was no Beachwood people. It was all, the whole Kenston, every single kid who went to Kenston High School was there watching. And they had a good wrestling team. The year before that, their heavyweight was Jack Rudney, who actually was an all-pro for Kansas City for years. A fantastic athlete, and I knew him. He's a really good guy. I never wrestled against him, but we used to practice together. In any event, he graduated. He was a year older than me, and their heavyweight the next year was a real big, chubby guy. He was a decent wrestler. He won the Kenston tournament, but I was way stronger than him, so everybody lost, and then it was my turn at heavyweight, and I tortured the guy. I took him down 3 times before I pinned him just because I was mad. And everybody was booing me. It was really something to see. And then what happened, unfortunately, is after that first match, we went to Shaker for a scrimmage, and I tore up my knee, and I was gone. So in the picture that you'll see, I'm standing with the team in clothes and have a crutch under my left arm, but you can't see it in the picture. It's very disappointing because I loved wrestling. 1965, this is the first wrestling team. Okay, this is me right here in the middle, and that's Coach Schrock, who was our football coach, who just did us a favor and came to practice. And then this is me on top of one of the guys here wrestling. So this is the first real Beachwood wrestling team. The first practices we had, when we had our first team with Schrock, it was in the teacher's lounge. We had to take all the furniture out of the teacher's lounge, okay? Then take the mats out of the gym, put down the mats, do our wrestling, put the mats away, and take the teacher's lounge just furniture and put it back in the every night. Half the practice was setting up the wrestling room. Absolutely. So this beautiful wrestling room, you guys don't have to do that. So you can visualize what I had to go through. Now, when Iammarino came, we had a full mat, and we had it in the cafeteria, I think. We had a real mat. We didn't have a real wrestling mat at first. We just had these little gym mats. And then this is the first wrestling team where Iammarino is. You can see how little Iammarino is over here. This is me in the corner because I was on crutches. I messed up my Indian shaker. But this is the picture of the first Beachwood wrestling team. And here's a little article about the Beachwood wrestling team. This is Beachcomber, June 1966. It's the first time they ever talk about wrestling. And here's the article. Name is MVP Bob Bloom, of course, that's me. And then here's the article, Beachwood Wrestling. It says, fielding its first wrestling team, coached by Mr. Domenick Iammarino, it has turned out to be a successful sport at Beachwood High School. 3 matches were won, which is very good. 6 lost, and 1 tied with Hawken. Although Bob Bloom was hurt early in the season with the knee injury, the team came through successfully, led by Marty Axel and Barry Guinness. Okay, so that's the first article ever written about Beachwood Wrestling, with Coach I's name in it, and there it is, Coach Iammarino. So that's his first article. This is his first picture. He was a good guy. You have to understand, in today's world, they probably have coaches for different weights. They probably have an assistant coach, but if you have one coach and he weighs 125 pounds, it's hard for him to roll around with the guys that weigh 220. Moves don't work if the weight, that's why there's weight classes in wrestling. Maybe a 165 can roll with a 190. You know, there's some variance where it moves, but if you try to lift up a leg of a guy that's 230 pounds and you weigh 120, that leg ain't moving. And I'm sure that Iammarino, first year, of course, there was no assistant coach. But I'm sure after that, after I graduated, hopefully he had assistant coaches who could roll around with the bigger guys. My greatest memory of Beachwood Wrestling would be a match I didn't wrestle. My best friend, Marty Axel, who started the team with me, I was hurt, he was still wrestling, and he was wrestling 165. So in the old days, it was a lot different. They didn't have as many weight classes. They only had one division. It's not like now they have all these divisions. I mean, if you went to the state, you were the best wrestler in the state. There was only one division. And I came to cheer on Marty, my best friend, and he won the Kinston tournament. He was the first Beachwood wrestler to win a tournament. I was the first Beachwood wrestler to win a match, and he was the first Beachwood wrestler to win a tournament. And I was just so happy for him. You know, that the team that, him and I started, there was no wrestling, and, Marty and I developed Beachwood Wrestling, and he actually won a tournament, and we were jumping for joy. So that would be my greatest Beachwood memory. Unfortunately, Marty passed away this year. We just with his wife, they had a celebration of life ceremony this week for him. So it was very, very hard. Well, I'll give you an interesting wrestling story, okay? My junior year, 65, when we just had our little squad that weren't really a team, my buddy Marty Axel and I decided to enter the AAU tournament, which is at the Cleveland Arena, downtown Cleveland. And we don't know anything about it. We'd never been in a tournament. We were just 2 Beachwood kids, So we go downtown, and there's the seating on the wall. We didn't even know what seating was. And I see my name, and next to my name there's a guy, and there's a number 1 by his name. I said, well, what's his number? Was he the first one to enter? I didn't know. I didn't even remember what a draw sheet was. I didn't know anything. I just knew I was a pretty big, tough guy, and I wasn't afraid of anybody, and I thought I could beat anybody. And so, they said there's going to be men here. There's going to be college people. It was an AAU open tournament, so anybody can enter. Okay. So the match starts, and I go out, and I see the guy I'm supposed to wrestle. He didn't look that big to me. I was about 230. He was maybe 200 in that range. Well built, about 200 pounds. I have on my Beachwood T-shirt that says Bisons, because they thought the plural of bison was bisons back in the old days. They didn't realize the grammatical mistake. And I had on my sweatpants, my shorts over my sweatpants. He had on a USA Olympic uniform. Okay, and I really didn't even know what it was. I just figured that's his wrestling tights. Well, it turned out that his name was Harry Huska, very, very famous wrestler. He was the most well-known wrestler in that era, in the heavyweight division. And I had a nice match with him. It lasted 27 seconds. He took me down, near pinned me. Somehow I got out of it and took me down again. I thought I was on the mat for 3 minutes. I look up, it was 27 seconds. And that's somebody that you really would be your hero. So Harry Huska he was a gentleman. He didn't try to hurt me. He knew I was just a little high school kid. He was an Olympic champion, but it was fun. So he would be an interesting hero, yeah. He was this young guy. He looked like he was 14 years old, okay? He had this little baby face, he's right out of Kent State, and he had that kind of Italian swaver. Of course, our team was all Jewish, and it was a little interesting. I liked him, but I never rolled around with him. He actually arranged it so I could practice John Carroll, because I had no one to roll around with in the room, and he was friends with, I think his name was Tony DiCarlo, the coach at John Carroll. So I used to practice at John Carroll senior year. There would be no Beachwood wrestling if I didn't start it. Okay, I started wrestling. I also started the recreation program. We had no recreation program. My son was 5 years old. Him and Ryan went to school together, and all the other schools had recreation programs. So I went to the athletic director, who was Jimmy Cowan, who was a Beachwood boy like me. I said, Jimmy, why don't we have a recreation program? He says, Bob, there's no budget for it. There's no budget for recreation for wrestling. He said, we're already spending more money than we have. I said, Jimmy, I'll do it for free. Let me do it. He said, all right, Bob, you want to do it for free? Do it. So we rented out to Tuesday night. We went to the Beachwood Junior High School on Tuesday nights, and every Tuesday we got together with kids like Ryan Peters, and and Scott Peters was my assistant. He was a high school boy then. He would help me, and that's how really people got into wrestling. Because if you don't have a kids program, you don't have a program. Okay, you just can't start wrestling when you're in junior high school. I mean, we started. My boys were 5 years old. I had kids from 5 years old to probably 12 years old, and on the first recreation team, and some of them went on to be very good wrestlers. And so that was probably my #1 contribution. And then I turned it over to Bernie. Bernie wanted to run it 2 days a week. He said, Bob, we need it 2 days. I said, 1 day a week's not for me. I run a business. I don't really have time for it. I said, you want to run it? I'll give you the program. So Bernie took over the program. He did a very good job. He was very dedicated to Beachwood wrestling. So I mean, I kind of opened the door, and Bernie opened it further and made the program better than I had it. The kids that were really good would say, oh, I'm going to go to Longwood. I don't want to go to your program. So it was a competing program, actually, for little kids, the Longwood program. When I started, Longwood was there already. Longwood was around forever. They had a lot of good wrestlers. When I ran it Tuesday nights, I was just trying to get the kids into wrestling a little bit. I taught them a couple moves, made it fun for them. We had a lot of fun. We had a couple of scrimmages. I'll never forget, there's a very interesting story. Had one kid, he was probably a 5th grader, chubby kid, and he was wrestling. We were wrestling against West Jogga, and the kid on West Jogga got high on me, grabbed him, he rolled him, and pinned him. And afterwards, he comes up to me. He says, Coach. I said, what, Josh? What's going on? He said, I got to tell you something. I said, what's that, Josh? He said, the moves. I said, what about the moves? He said, the moves. I said, what about them? He said, they work. I said, that's what wrestling's all about, buddy. The moves work, okay? And that's the story of wrestling. It doesn't matter how big you are, how strong you are. If you got the moves, the same way Harry Huska pinned me in 27 seconds. He wasn't any stronger than I was. He had moves. Well, I think all sports. I was also the most valuable player on the football team. If you're into athletics, you focus on winning. And that's kind of how I built my business. You're a winner or a loser. And that's what sports teaches you. Well, you see, today's world's full of babies and sissies. Everybody's afraid to touch anybody. And you can't push anybody. You can't say anything nasty about me. Wrestling's one of the few sports you can actually grab somebody and hold them, okay? I have a 6-year-old grandson who I'm teaching to wrestle. And I'm showing him, I said, well, you grab that arm. That's not his arm anymore. That's your arm now, okay? So wrestling teaches you to be tough. It just does. I don't care if you're 103 pounds, okay? Wrestlers, you can walk around and not be afraid. So there's no other sport that really does that. I mean, there's nothing like it. Tennis, you're other side of the racket. Even football, it's a team sport. You got shoulder pads, you got coaches. It's just you, and you have to be tough. I think Iammarino was actually good at that, teaching the kids. He intentionally pushed the kids around to make them tough. I remember he used to twist Barry Guinness in knots, and Barry became a very good wrestler. So it's the only sport, maybe boxing, but boxing is dangerous. But yeah, wrestling teaches you to be tough. I think it's good for little kids to wrestle.
Hey Maverick, how you doing? Thanks for having me come in today. I thought I'd bring a little of my memorabilia from back in '72, my letter jacket. I haven't worn it in about 50 years. The old letter sweater, so got that on. Back in the 60s and 70s, we used to wear these things. It's been in my closet for about 50 years. So I'm going to take this off and we can get started with whatever you'd like to talk about. Wrestling was something I never really knew about. Ninth grade, I came from a country school in Michigan. I was a country boy. I used to climb trees and silos and things, so I was pretty strong actually. So I was in ninth grade algebra class with Mr. Vihar, and I don't know, he saw something in me, I guess. Maybe I was too small for football, too small for basketball, so he thought, hey, maybe you'd be a good little wrestler. So I'm going to introduce you to this coach of ours. His name is Coach I. And I said, okay, that'd be great. So he walked me down the hall. I met Coach I. I said, Coach I, I'm here to talk about wrestling. So what's it all about? And that's my first introduction to wrestling. So Beachwood Wrestling was a pioneer, I would say. Coach I was, I think, right out of college from Kent State, and he started the first program. I think Bob Bloom was his first wrestler. So nobody really knew what it would take to be good. You know, it's like you go to wrestling practice and then you go home. I never really wrestled a full season. My freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, senior year. Coach I got to make up for lost time. So I'm going to wrestle at every tournament I can this summer. Nobody really did that. And then I said, would you mind if I brought some like really good guys into our wrestling room? And nobody did that back in the day. So you were a coach, you had your guys, you blew the whistle, you did some drills, but nobody really understood the sport as far as, you know, how to diet, how to make weight, strength and conditioning. You know, there's a whole science behind that. So I evolved through the years with, you know, training, and again, Coach I was kind of the conduit that helped me get to that next level. And he was actually learning through the years. So he was new at the sport as a coach. So my family brought in talent that he would have never met. Rick Sanders, a world champ, Jimmy Carr, Fletcher Carr. I mean, we brought in these great guys into our wrestling room, which was great. And then what that did, you know, it really helped me, but it also helped guys like Ricky Stone, Rick Sorkin, the future state champs, which are a couple years younger than me, but you know, they saw the work ethic that I had, and I learned that work ethic really from a world champion, Rick Sanders. The cross training, I used to do judo and things, you know, like nobody did that, or gymnastics. And so I brought a lot of things to Coach I and shared with him, and then he took that and passed it on to his guys. And Beachwood became great, as you know. We had many state champs. Well, you know, Ron Madow was the leader. He was the animal. His nickname was the Animal. And you know, I remember watching him down at the state tournament. His senior year was very inspirational and motivating for me. And I go, I want to be down here. I want to do this. So it wasn't easy, but it happened. It was pretty exciting to win the states, you know. I used to watch videos of myself wrestling. I mean, I'd go to a match, I'd watch video, and matches I'd lose, I go, oh, I can't believe I did that. I learned so much by watching. And my coaches, Coach I, they'd come over to my house and we'd watch videos, and Coach Safferstein, we'd watch the videos. And my senior year, I think I lost 3 matches. I lost the Kenson tournament finals, the conference tournament, lost sectional tournament. I just thought, God, how can I win state if I can't win the conference or win sectionals? But to my defense, I was actually sick during the sectionals and conference. And then right after that, I was healthy for districts. I kind of walked through districts and states. I kind of walked through states also. But winning that match, the first 30 seconds or so, the guy shoots a fireman's on me, and I block him with an underhook. And I'm just kind of like hanging in there, like he's trying to do this fireman. He doesn't know that I have a really good pancake that I learned from the coaching staff, you know, Coach I and Coach Safferstein. And most guys don't know how to do a pancake. They try to pry it like this. So I used a lot of leverage and little basic teeter-totter, the fulcrum, and I was really a science kind of guy. I tried to leverage pressure points and things like that. So I flipped him with a pancake. I'm up 5-0 in the finals. And I was just like, I think I can win this match. And when it was over, it was like, wow, this is fun. I waved to everybody. We did it, we did it. And Coach I and Coach Morgenstern the night before were out having dinner, and they're all nervous. We got a big day tomorrow, Mark. And I go, chill out, guys, it's okay. I wasn't worried about losing. I feared one wrestler, that was myself. I didn't fear any other wrestler. I wasn't worried about any other wrestler, but I feared myself that I couldn't go 100% for the 6 minutes that we went. So I trained so hard that even if I had to go overtime, I could still go 100%. But I tried not to go into overtime. So I tried to keep the matches to the point where I go so hard that it's not even close. But anyway, winning state was pretty exciting. So who inspired me? I mean, I'd say Coach I was a father figure to me. You know, it's like my parents were divorced, and my dad was in Michigan. I spent a lot of time with Coach I within the practices and such. I had a stepbrother that was an All-American. He was an All-American football player. And when I was in high school, I was kind of inspired by him, watched how hard he worked, and I go, you know, in the summer, he trained hard in the summer to be a good athlete in the school year. And I think I learned a lot from that, because back in the day, nobody really went to tournaments every weekend. Nobody trained all year round like they do now. So I started wrestling in 9th grade, and I learned a lot over the years how to accelerate and be good at that sport, which, of course, you can take that to life. And if hard work usually pays off. You know, the harder you work, the luckier you get, right? The first coach I really ever had, and in 9th grade, he introduced me to wrestling. And, you know, he didn't really know me. I was one of the boys. But over the years, we became close. He was at my house after I won a national title. He just came from districts tournament where David Fischer just was a conference or district champ. But after that tournament, Coach I is at my house. He was at my wedding. See him at Dunkin' Donuts all the time. Not as much as I used to, but yeah, so he became a friend. I had a travel agency. He used to travel with me and such. So we kind of known each other from when I was 14 till now I'm 70. It's like a long time. He was my coach. He was my leader. I'd look at him for direction and such. So a lot of fun wrestling for Coach I. I'd like to think I did. So when Coach I, in 1971, in the team photo of our team, he wrote in there, good luck to my next year captain, 1971 to 72 captain, and if you work hard, we'll go all the way. You never be doubting your abilities. Being a captain helped me help my team, because we had a lot of guys did really well, and I'd like to think that I inspired them in practice. You can't take me down. You can't hold me down. You can't escape from me. Nobody really liked to wrestle with me because I was never easy. I mean, I didn't hurt anybody, but I never dogged it. And I'd bring in like half a dozen t-shirts because I'd probably sweat 5 to 10 pounds in a practice. And I just go as hard as I could. And I think that I need a fresh guy. I need a fresh guy. I need a fresh guy. Hard work in sports, in business, in life. And also, I have to say, positive winning mental attitude. I always, guys, like, you know, lighten up. Still, you're only 5 pounds overweight. It's okay. You don't beat yourself up, or you feel I'm so tired. I can't go anymore. But part of being successful in wrestling and life is having a positive winning mental attitude. Like, I go to work a lot of times. People say to me, "I just can't be so upbeat like you. It's at 8 in the morning." I go, okay, but you have a choice. You can, with my kids, my wife, and others, I go, you have a choice. You can choose to be happy, or you can choose to be sad or depressed. What is it that you want? Why are you here? Anybody that comes into this room can be a state champ. As an athlete, you have to lay out, what are your goals? Do I want to just be on the team? Do I want to have a 500 record? Do I want to be varsity? Do I want to place at sectionals, or do I want to be a state champ? And I was here a few years back. I asked all the guys, I did a clinic, and so I said, guys, put your head down and close your eyes. How many of you are willing to do what it takes to be a state champ? I think pretty much all of them raised their hand. I want to be a state champ, because everybody wants to be a state champ, or the best you can be. All right, you want to be a state champ, let's see how hard you can run. And then I watched, most of the kids were like jogging. I go, that's not how you become a state champ. I said, so if you want to be a state champ, you have to be committed. You have to have the right mental attitude, you have to have the right physical build and endurance, you have to have the right technique, get good sleep, eat good foods. So you got to be the whole package if you want to be the best. To anybody that wants to be successful, it's not easy, because to get up in the morning, and like I used to get here at 7 in the morning and go run 2 miles before school. I was like, why am I doing this? I said, and that wasn't that much, really, 2 miles, but hardly anybody did stuff like that back in the day. And then if you make that commitment, you could write your goals down and talk about your strengths, talk about your weaknesses, and go live your dream. Go for your dream.
I was with a group of kids, I think there's 4 of us, and one of the individuals, father and family, were wrestlers, and there was no youth wrestling at Beachwood, Ohio. Ironically, the youth program at that time was the Heights YMCA. So I went to the Heights YMCA to start wrestling, and had no experience. My father wouldn't know wrestling from football. But that was my start in wrestling. It was just this group of 4 or 5 Beachwood kids, and I liked it. When I was in 7th grade, Beachwood was 7th through 12th grade in one building. So as a 7th grader, I was going to school with seniors. That was normal for me, because that's all I knew. And I had an opportunity to wrestle with another 7th grader, and that year both of us wrestled JV, and we also wrestled JV in 8th grade. Another wrestler was a guy named Doug Weiss, who eventually went to US and became a 2-time national prep school champion. Not too shabby, but we all started at Beachwood. Memory's a slippery thing, you know. Whatever you remember, it's a distortion of what really happened, and we edit as we go back, especially when you get older. But my recollection is that the rules did not allow Doug and I to wrestle JV, but Coach I let us wrestle JV, but each match was a forfeit. But it allowed us to wrestle, you know, I remember wrestling, you know, juniors and seniors, and, you know, I was getting crushed. But it was fun. I think when Coach I became the wrestling coach, I think it was an informal program before then, wrestling with these guys who are 18 years old. And Coach I, now I was a history major, so my math isn't so good, but I think he was about 14 years old too. He looked like he was 14. He was this little guy filled with energy, typical boomer. I'm not going to talk about the fact that we only had 3 TV stations and all that stuff. I'm not going there. But I will tell you, when we started wrestling, there was no wrestling room. We didn't have these beautiful mats. We had, you know, what I call tumbling mats that had a cover. And every practice, we had to set that up in the cafeteria. That's where we wrestled. And we had to put this up and take it down every day. So that's how I got into all of this. There was a big rivalry between Richmond Heights High School and Beachwood at that time. And they had a good program. And the head coach at Richmond Heights, I think, was a friend of Coach I's, Coach Paporis. The neurons are working today. It was my senior year, and big rivalry. We were wrestling at Richmond Heights, and the gym is filled. The 2 schools that would fill gyms for wrestling was Beachwood and Richmond Heights. I mean, other schools did, but we could fill a room. I even, in 9th grade, president of my class, I organized an after wrestling match dance, which was unheard of. You did those after basketball, but we had a lot of kids. So, okay, I'm at Richmond Heights, big rivalry, and I'm wrestling who I think might have been the captain of their football team. He was like the fair-haired child of Richmond Heights. He was beloved. And, you know, I thought he had a big attitude. And, you know, that didn't play right with me. I didn't think he was all that. During the match, kind of took him apart. And then I even, during a very tense moment in the match, I smiled and laughed at him. Crowd went crazy. I was like the bad guy in a big time wrestling arena. They were just screaming for blood, my blood. You know, he went crazy when I did that. The match is over. I looked over because Coach Paporis knew me, I knew him, and I see he's being restrained by his assistant coaches. He wants to charge on the mat and like beat me up. This is a wrestling term. You don't have to be a dick. You could be a good winner. You can certainly be a good loser. And I think you should learn both those traits when you wrestle, being a good winner and being a good loser, because you're going to lose too. And one of the great things about wrestling is that when you lose a match, first of all, you feel terrible that you've lost. But if you think to yourself, I worked as hard as I could, maybe I just met a better wrestler, I just have to accept the fact that lost this match, there's another match next week, and you move on. And those are the type of lessons that you apply later in life. Don't be a dick, number one. Be a good winner, be a good loser. The only thing you can do is prepare, give your best effort, even professionally. You know, as a lawyer for over 40 years, and an acting judge for over close to 25 years, those are the types of things that I applied in my profession. Prepare, do your best. Can't win every case, not supposed to. Sometimes you meet a wrestler who's just better than you, but you've worked hard. And those are, going forward, the lessons that you take with you. Although wrestling is an individual sport, we talk about this all the time. You get on the mat by yourself, but really you don't. When you get on the mat, you're getting on the mat with your coaches, number one, your teammates, number two. I mean, it's you on the mat by yourself, but without that type of support, and maybe your family support, really there's no way you're going to be successful. I was friends with Ronnie Madow. Ronnie was probably one of the first success stories in terms of career, and I think Ronnie was someone I really looked up to. But that whole group of wrestlers, a guy named Jim Rosenblatt, I remember the Belfiore brothers, those names come to mind. But to say, is there any single wrestler? I don't think so. I think it was just more of the culture. He was a big influence on all the wrestlers, I think. Certainly me. You know, I was not, I don't think I was an easy guy. Well, I think there were other guys who were challenging. Lauren Rabnick, but in a good way. And what a great guy, by the way. But, you know, you had, in that time period, to be able to challenge this guy, Kraus, who is strong thinking, but he's all over the place. You know, what does it take from a coach to keep me committed? And I think Coach I was so successful is because, in a lot of ways, he did it by example. You know, I can sit and tell you, be a good guy, don't be a dick, whatever I tell you. If I'm not acting that way, it's just hypocritical and the lessons are lost. So I think he was always the real deal. He talked the talk, but he walked the walk. If he needed to tell you something you didn't want to hear, he would do that. But the way I felt he kept me in the game, in retrospect, at the time, you know, 16, 17 years old, no frontal lobe development, you know, you're all over the place in a time of social upheaval. You know, how did he do it? Well, he did it with compassion. He was understanding. He could be a tough taskmaster, and those are the things that really, I think, distinguish himself with me. And I know he's done that with others. And, you know, to talk about, you know, the success of the program, we're sitting in this beautiful wrestling room, you look at the walls, and the success speaks for itself then. You know, he formed young people, and he formed future coaches who also had great success. You know, when Coach I left Beachwood, his first retirement, is this like his 15th retirement? You know, we may do this 20 years from now, and I don't know if I'll be here, but I think Coach I will be here, retiring yet once again, and at least I hope so. And it wasn't just the best wrestlers in the room. Coach I took time with all his wrestlers. That's my memory. And that he was even-handed, and you were going to get an easy ride from him if you were doing well. In fact, maybe he was going to ride you harder. The thing that I think about with Coach I, who was a young man, he's entering a program that really has no program. You can't have an informal wrestling program. It just doesn't work that way. So here he comes in and takes on this job, this role to be the head wrestling coach, where there is no history of wrestling. Mid to late 60s and into the 70s, there's a cultural tsunami taking place. We're seeing things that we've never seen before. If the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan, a boomer reference, in 1964, by 65 it was peace, love, and happiness. Drugs were rampant. It was really a different time. Rebelling youth. 68 was the Chicago Democratic Convention, which ended up being a big riot. There was still compulsory service. The draft was on at that time. Vietnam was taking place. I think Tet was in 67. Tet was a huge offense of time in the Vietnam War, where many, many people died. So this was a time of turmoil and revolution, and here you have Domenick Iammarino trying to convince a group of teenagers that you should be wrestlers. And he was successful. He got a core group of people. And I remember being with these guys, people like Bob Bloom, Lauren Rabnick, Jim Rosenblatt. To take on the role as a head coach where there's been no program, I don't understand how you even think to do that in a sport that is so punishing, in a good way, you hope, where there's other sports that people could engage in or other things that they'll do. But Coach I had that ability, that charisma. After my accident, I really missed out on a lot of wrestling. And life goes on, and finishing school and law school and family, all those great things. And I just didn't feel comfortable coming to see wrestling. So I missed a whole generation, maybe 2 generations of great wrestlers that were from Beachwood, Ohio. Heard about them. But then my middle son was 9 years old. He was a very good athlete. He was an excellent hockey player. I think he had heard a lot of people talk about wrestling around me. And he said, well, I'd like to try wrestling. So we came to Beachwood to the youth program, the elite program. I think he might have been 9. So a late starter for his generation, maybe. When I walked into the wrestling room, it was in a more open space then, the years just melted away. And I saw Coach I, and I saw Ronnie Madow and Lauren Rabnick and Barry Guinness, who was from that original class of wrestlers, all there, coaching. And I thought I was like caught in some science fiction time loop. And where am I? This is like I've returned, from where I started. And I was with my son. It doesn't get any better than that. And I got to renew old friendships. It certainly cemented my connection to the wrestling community. And I made great new friends, like a guy named Scott Peters and Ryan Peters, and how they took Alex under his wing. But everyone helped everybody. And I thought, this is so great. In some ways, I regret having missed out on all the great wrestlers. And I look around and I know some of these guys. I remember, I think Jordan Lipp was on a tear. This is in the early 2000s, I think, in my son's wrestling. And Jordan would takedowns with my son, which, was just great, because that's what wrestlers do, And so we're driving home. I said, well, this is a great day, Alex. He says, why? I said, you took down Jordan Lipp. He said, yeah, I did. Of course, Jordan had let him. But, that type of experience. So coming back to wrestling is something that in the community was just beyond great. So just wrestling overall as a culture and what it's done for me and I think it's done for others, is that when you've been in the program, regardless of your success, if you've been a wrestler, well, then you're part of the select group, because most other athletes you talk to, whatever they do, you mention wrestling, many will just say, those guys are crazy. You gotta be crazy to wrestle. And I always saw it as a calling, and it's hard to leave something that you're called to. And I see that professionally, if I'm in a matter where I'm dealing with a guy who I can immediately tell is a wrestler, you can almost tell when they walk in the room, like two dogs, I can be much more frank in my discussions, and we can get to issues much more quickly. We don't always agree, but I think this is part of wrestling. In 1975, I was in this accident, and I was sidelined for a while. And when I came back home after this accident, a lot of wrestlers came to visit me, and Coach I came to visit me. And some of these people were younger than me, didn't really know me. It was just the support of the wrestling community and Coach I. And those were tough times for me, but it was the lessons I learned in wrestling that I believe pretty much saved my life. Let me know that I could push myself physically beyond whatever I thought I could do, because that's something that you learn in wrestling. You think you hit the wall, and you find a way to break through it. Without wrestling, I don't think I would have had that ability. Just this morning, I was going to the gym, because that's what, old wrestlers do. And I see a guy I know, and he's walking out, and it just happened this morning. And he says to me, just not feeling it today. I'm just going to go home. And immediately in my head, I think, not a wrestler, because if you show up, you're going to start. There are plenty of days I didn't want to come to practice, even after we had a real wrestling room, but I always went to practice, didn't miss practice. And once you start, you get into it and you're doing it. This is some of the advantages that wrestling gives you. It's just the basics. You watch, like in my generation, Dan Gable was the GOAT, right? 3-time NCAA champion. People don't remember is that in 1972 was the Munich Olympics, the Munich massacre. But the Olympics took place. And Dan Gable, who really had no experience as a freestyle wrestler, he goes to the Olympics that year and he wins a gold medal. Now, part of freestyle wrestling is sometimes you give points to get points. No one scored a point on him. That is unheard of. That's like pitching 5 perfect games. So he did it with basics. If you watch what he does single legs and double legs, but he executes them so perfectly that you can't stop it. So I would say to a new wrestler, take a deep breath. Everything you've done in your practice room with your teammates is what's going to carry you through. Listen to your coach and do the best you can. It's all you can do. And don't look back. Enjoy the moment.
I was at one of my brother's basketball games, and I walked into the back room, which was the wrestling room behind the stands, and they threw me on the mat, and I was in 4th grade, and that's how I started to wrestle. I followed Mark Hawald. I wrestled with someone that started with me, and he was in 3rd grade. His name was David Fischer. And by the time we got to 9th grade, we were as good as the high school people. Winning the state title and hugging Coach I as I came off the mat. It's something that, you're working at for 10 years of your life, and once you do it, it's an experience. My favorite wrestler, or my history wrestler, was Ronnie Madow, who, I was in 6th grade and followed his career, and he was really my hero. Great person, great wrestler, and I just followed him. Coach I, means everything. He's part of my past, part of my upbringing, all the way through till I was done in college with wrestling. He motivated me. Everything you heard speech-wise today was absolutely true. He was very loud in the corners. He was very loud in the locker rooms and on the wrestling mats, and he was just a great motivator. So I do believe I made a contribution. I believe that David Fischer and myself started the guys after us who we were wrestling and making better, and it led to years later of good wrestlers, state champs, right following us, because we taught them, they taught people, and so on, and they all became great wrestlers, a lot of state champs after us. It impacted everything. It made me find the right wife, the right business that I went into. I work with my son. He kind of learned from me the same tactics of life and that I learned from wrestling. I still have all my friends who followed me during wrestling. They're still my close friends to this day. Wrestling makes people. It makes the core of an individual. It makes you into a good person, a good worker. What you have to do to become a wrestler and continue it and stick it out for many years just makes you a better person.
I got involved with wrestling through my gym teacher at Hilltop Elementary School, Ernie Silverstein. He saw me wrestling in the gym and came to me and asked me if I'd like to participate at the high school, and I started going to high school practices. That's where I met Coach Domenick Iammarino. Starting to grow with Domenick, but at a very slow pace. It's something I always wanted to make really big at the high school. Obviously, the greatest moment of my wrestling career was winning the state title in 1976. Many other accomplishments. I went to Iran on a tour and learned lots that I wasn't the best in the world at that time, so I still had a lot to work for. My contribution to wrestling at Beachwood High School is something that I worked really hard for, and hopefully the other kids take notice and just want to beat all the goals and accomplishments that I had and had fun doing it. Wrestling made me dedicated and focused on the goal, which is what I've always done, and I take sales as a wrestling match. Every day you have to be on top, and you also have to get out of situations, and that's why Coach I taught us all a stand-up. If you couldn't do a stand-up at Beachwood High School, you couldn't wrestle for Beachwood High. My advice to all future wrestlers and Bison wrestlers is they want to be there wrestling and have fun doing it. Good luck to everyone. Thanks.
I got involved back in 7th grade, and I was in the South Euclid school system at Greenview. I think they call it junior high. I was going to say middle school. Beachwood's on a middle school system. So I was involved through a friend. I wrestled there, and then when I came to Beachwood, I moved to Beachwood going into 8th grade. And in Beachwood, just some of my friends that I was making friends with at the time asked me to come out and wrestle, and I ended up wrestling in 8th grade. I was lucky enough to be with some guys that had some wrestling experience. Tommy Weiss and some of my other friends were good, and they brought me along. And thankfully, one thing led to another, and then by the time I got into 9th grade, things progressed. Kirk Morgenstern was our wrestling coach at the time, and he brought us along, and I think I had a winning record, maybe 8-0 or something like that back in the day in 8th grade. So I was showing some talent, and I got involved with Tommy and Michael Goldberg and Jeff Tolan and some of these guys. Those two guys were a grade below me, but we all kind of gelled together. They thought I would be some good competition for Alan Savransky, who was one of the lighter weights at Beachwood High School. So I went up there to practice, and it was after practice, A couple of the guys grabbed me and they tied me up and threw me in a locker. Ricky Stone, I think, he's one of the culprits behind all that. But it was a way, it was kind of like a little bit of welcomed hazing, which I could handle, and it was fun. From there, I ended up wrestling in high school, and we just had the core team of a lot of good guys. And if we're going to go into talking about Coach I, his strength was taking a desperate, just all different types of, personalities, and he took us all and gelled us together because you had all sorts of personalities. We had so many good times as a team, and you could go from, practices. Believe it or not, practices were brutal, but at the same time, you're enjoying it. It's kind of a strange dichotomy. But you're living through a really tough practice, and then all of a sudden you go in the locker room, and it's just a lot of fun. Some of the special moments are a couple of the big wins I've had, and a special moment is even losing. At one point when I wrestled, it was in the Kenston tournament in my junior year. I ended up losing in the semifinals to somebody, and I was wrestling up a weight class. And at that point, I realized that I was better than I thought. And even though I lost, it gave me that ability to think, hey, I maybe am better than I think. And from then on, I just went on and ended up winning the state my junior year. But it was kind of that loss that kind of tweaked something in my brain. It was to Rob Sherrill, I think. I was coaching over at Fuchs Mizrahi. I was the head wrestling coach there. And it was after practice, and I ordered a pizza to go from Izzy's. And I went to Izzy's to go pick up my pizza, and the guy behind the counter knew that I was a wrestling coach there, and we somehow got into it, and he started asking me some questions, and he was sizing me up. And I'm like, do you want to go a takedown right now? And he said yes. So there were kids in the store, and they literally cleared out the tables in the middle of the store. And this is right before dinner. I'm a little hungry, but I'm, anxious to take on the challenge. And I look at this guy, and we start going at it. And I have to admit, it was a beautiful move. I popped this guy's head down, and I did this. It's called a front headlock fireman's. Threw him over me right into the, right onto the ground, and took him down. It was done, said thanks, and I went, got my pizza, went to go to my car. The kids were going crazy in the restaurant. They were all excited. And I go to my car, and I go to open the door in my car, and I go to sit in, and I'm like, oh, my back is wasted. By the time I got home, I could not even move. But, I got the victory there. By the time I got home, my wife was like, what are you doing? You're too old to be doing that type of thing. But it was one of my best victories, I have to say, that I ever had. But I never got the video of it, but I have to admit, it was a great move. It was a beautiful move. There's several guys that I looked at, and it's interesting because, as a wrestler, you kind of mimic certain styles. Ricky Sorkin was a wrestler that just used to wrestle with and get into like interesting positions and work his way out and into other things. So I kind of watched how he handled things. I liked David Fischer, who was quick and swift, and I liked what he did. I liked Jerry Levine, who was strong and did his type of technique. And I just kind of was watching and learning from these guys, which were older than me. And then at the same time, I'm wrestling with a lot of strong competition, which made me better. I had the Tommy Weisses of the world, the Stu Smileys, the Richard Harris, and all these guys were in my weight class that every day I'm working with them, and they're all at a high level to begin with, and it just kind of made me better. So just coupling the competition I had locally, and then also looking up at the older guys and seeing what they offered, helped me progress into a better wrestler. Coach I was there at a big part of my development. He was there coaching us and putting us through the grind, and at the same time being there for us when the ups and downs of practice and winning and losing, and just all around just a good person. And I ended up coaching. Your father brought me into coaching. I coached at Beachwood Middle School for some time after several years after I graduated, And I came back and I had a new respect for Coach I after I started to coach, because there's, you got to manage kids, you got to manage parents. And, Coach I, was juggling a lot of interesting personalities back in the day and interesting parents at the same time. So I guess over time, I have more respect for Coach I than being in the moment. Sometimes when you're just there as a young wrestler, you appreciate everything he does, but when you look on the big picture, he's a special guy, and to survive this long as he did, and I think he's done great. I feel like I was a hard worker. I kind of just kept straight into, I hope people respected my game, is all it was, and I hope that spoke for everything. I wasn't out there promoting or doing anything special. I was just trying to win and to be a good team member, and that's it. And I think in the big picture, people will look back on that and hopefully think it was a good thing. I'm sure you hear this from everybody. It gives you a discipline, and it has stuck with me from day one. It's not a sport that's a glamorous sport. It's a sport you got to dig in and do your work, and it's on the mat, and it's especially off the mat. You can't sit there and just put in that hour and a half after school and expect to be good. You have to do things after the fact, and that happens in life too. You can't just sit there and go to work and think you're done at 9 to 5 or whatever you're doing. You got to be working after the fact and when people aren't working. So it's the same thing when I was wrestling. I'd go work at my dad's restaurant, and I would go, in the back room, and I'd be doing dips on whatever I could find to do dips on, or I'd be doing something else, lifting and doing things to just make myself, give myself that extra strength. When I do push-ups or do anything, if you're doing 25, I'm doing 26. You're doing something in the mental part that gives you that extra edge, and that's how I operated, and it's how I continue to operate, personally and professionally. That's a good question. It's a new generation. It's as tough of a sport as it's ever been. It's still not a glamorous sport, and it's something that I just give them advice to stick it out and get those little victories that get you to the next step.
As a child, my family owned a wrestling school by the name of Ohio School of Wrestling. Through the Ohio School of Wrestling, I got involved with the sport. It was amazing. I graduated in 1980, but I wrestled with the likes of David Fischer, Ricky Stone, Ricky Sorkin, Jerry Levine, Alan Savransky, David Sternberg, Goldberg, Lapsley, Scott Peters. It was just great. A lot of characters, great guys. Unfortunately, my greatest memories would be losing in the state tournament 3 straight years. I blame that on him. At least 2 out of the 3 I blame on him. Yeah, one memory that really stands out was watching the David Fischer-Mark Zimmer match. I was a freshman, and I was sitting like right on above the mat, and that one stands out. That was a special match. Well, David Fischer had hurt his shoulder prior, the prior week in the district tournament to Oscar Eagle from Woodridge, and he kind of fought back. He was dealing with pain, and he had to wrestle Mark, who was arguably one of the greatest wrestlers ever, accomplishment in Ohio. And David went out and he took him down. He put him on his back. He was up 4 or 5-0, and Mark, turned it around and beat David. But it was just a great match, and it was a great memory because David, he was being a 14-year-old freshman. He was my role model. But I truly believe, other than myself losing 3 straight times, David Fischer could have been a 3-time state champ and should have been, but he had a lot of bad luck. Sorry, David. Well, of course, I have an older brother who didn't get to compete in the state wrestling tournament. He went to university school, but I have to say that as a child, He was my role model. He was a 2-time national prep school champion. He lost like 1 or 2 high school matches in the 4 years. So being my brother, had to be my role model. He has become a lifelong mentor and friend. I can say I'm probably the only one who can say that I have coffee with Coach every morning at 8 a.m. And he's influenced my life, not only athletically, but as a father, as a businessman, as a man. He's been a tremendous motivator in my life. I value that more than anything. We have coffee every morning. He, myself, Rick LaScala, Chuck. Now I invited Scott to join us, and he said he will. He promised me. And he would love it. I really value the lifelong. He's become one of my dearest friends in life, and that means more than anything to me. I've got to, got to know him as a person versus just a coach. Well, it's hard to say my contribution because, I did my 4 years at Beachwood and then I moved on. Over the years I would come back, for the first, say, 10 years I'd come back and wrestle with the guys, and I stayed involved. I coached at Beachwood a few years ago for a season. That was kind of fun. That was nice. But as far as my contribution, I feel like I could have contributed a whole lot more. My advice would be to just love it. Whether you win or lose, it doesn't matter. If you try to enjoy it, because I think if you really enjoy the sport, you're going to do well. You're going to persevere. And I would also tell them to work on all aspects of the game. Learn how to ride, learn the mat wrestling. That's one, learn mat wrestling. Learn how to ride, learn how to tilt. Watch Spencer Lee. He's the best.
A lot of energy. There was a activity after school, a couple days a week, that the middle school gym teacher was running for wrestling. And so something I just signed up for. My parents didn't sign me up for. I wanted to do it. It was in the old wrestling room, which is now, I think, the football locker room. It was probably about 1/10 of the size of this room. And we had mats with quilted mats on the wall. It was very 1950s, but we rolled around and got sweaty, and that's how it got started. Ricky Stone, David Fischer, Jerry Levine, Ricky Sorkin, and these guys, they all won state. So I came into the program when it was really peaking for the first time. And so there was a lot of talent, and there was a lot of expectation because there was so much talent. You could come in as a little beginner, which is what I was in 6th or 7th grade, and just pick a guy and copy him. Stay like Jerry Levine, tough guy, hard-nosed dude. Could I be like that? Maybe. Ricky Sorkin, smart wrestler, used his whole body, was great on his feet, but he was really great on top. He would score when he was on top from any different way. Can I do that stuff? So I was around a lot of really good guys. So I remember warming up for the finals of districts, which meant that you made the state tournament. And this was a 1980, 79-80 season. And I was warming up for the district finals with Tommy and David and Butch, all projected state champions. And I remember Tommy saying to me, "What are you doing here?" He was joking, obviously, but it was like, what am I doing here? How did this happen? And going from a not successful sophomore to state qualifier by junior year was just a function of being in a room with so many good guys and a great coach, and just being surrounded by talent and people leading by example, even guys who weren't captains, working so hard. There was a couple of days in the 70s where school was closed. There'd be an 8-foot snowdrift in front of these doors out in front of the gym, and we would swim over the snow to get in to wrestle. Someone sent me a video the other day of a Beachwood football game from my senior year. I was out that week, but I watched Jeff and Butch play. And both of them were such amazing athletes that it was like it brought a smile to my face and a tear to my eye at the same time. They were amazing. Butch was an amazing athlete. He walked in to Beachwood, I think 7th grade. His family moved up here, and he just
I don't think he ever wrestled before. He was the best on the team by the 4th practice. And he was the kind of guy that he had the sky's the limit written all over him. It was kind of a sad thing that it was kind of an underachievement, but he had so much talent that it was ridiculous. The three of us, Butch, Jeff, and I were the best of friends, but Jeff and I really came from similar family situations. By the time we became the captains together in the 1980-81 season, I can't say that we had grown up very much. We were still kind of the goofy guys, but I think we were those guys at that point that had to set an example for the young kids. And Scott Peters was there. He was a sophomore that year, and maybe he learned something from us, or maybe he didn't, I don't know. But being captains together and getting that responsibility, it made me grow up a little bit. He's all rooting for each other and being there for each other and spending basically every day together. Jeff not making it to the state tournament his senior year, it was disappointing for me. I wanted to go there with him. I wanted to go. It was just Butch and I senior year, and it wasn't 100% what it could have been because Jeff didn't make it down. And I don't remember exactly what happened, but he was always a team player, and he probably could have maybe gone a different weight, but for the team he did he did something different. Coach I was probably the factor that led to me having any success in life and being successful in wrestling. I was not a favorite with the teachers at Beachwood High School, to say the least. And it's not that Coach I made me study. He was the only person that would get in my face and say, "You're not working hard enough. You're not doing this right. You need to practice this another 1,000 times. You need to do something that's painful. You need to work through the pain." He would not take less than my best effort. And eventually that taught me a whole lesson in life. The wrestling was a very important thing for 4 or 5 years of my life, and then it wasn't. And the lessons I learned from wrestling at Beachwood, from Coach I, his style of coaching, his style of motivating, just carried on through life. So he was instrumental. Here's my father, and here's Coach I. He's got to be just below my father because that wouldn't be right. But Coach I had an influence on me that he probably doesn't even realize. I was 4-12 as a sophomore in varsity. I made state the next year, and I was state runner-up the year after that. 24 months from a loser to state runner-up. So maybe that was an impact. It's possible. If Michael Goldberg could do it, then it's not because I was Butch Lapsley or Jeff Tolan naturally. I was Michael Goldberg with basically a really good coach and good examples in the wrestling room and just people that would not let me give up. So that was probably the impact. But being 40-something years ago, I don't know that that's really an impact anymore. I came back and coached quite a bit over the years. Some years I was officially on the staff, but as I got busier in my practice, I really didn't have time to be here at 3:30 as much as I really wanted to be. But Beachwood Wrestling gave me 1,000 times more than I gave it. When I got to school, I took all of that motivation and all of that getting through the pain and working until it hurt, all of those lessons that I learned in not this room exactly, but in this room, directly transferred to school. I studied, and friends would go out at night, and I would be just like I was in this wrestling room. What is the other guy that I'm going to wrestle this week? What is he doing to get ready? How many miles is he running? How many sprints is he doing? How many minutes of drilling is he doing? I have to double that. If I had 200 pages to read, I not only read them all, but I would outline them. I would take the extra step and think, what do I have to do to be successful? I just see a direct correlation. I don't know if I saw it in the moment, but in the long run, what I learned in the wrestling room, specifically what I learned from Coach I, in terms of working and pain and pushing through pain and not being afraid to fail and not being in your head too much, just basically trusting yourself and your training and what you're doing to prepare. directly translated to college and to law school and to everything I've done since. Be prepared to get roughed up. Be prepared to be uncomfortable. Be prepared to push yourself beyond what you ever thought you could do, and you give yourself the best chance to be successful. And if you go through that process, even if you're not the most successful, even if you didn't make state tournament, or even if you didn't have a winning record, if you go through the process and give it everything you can, you will get what you're supposed to get out of it, which is the toughness, the ability to endure, to persevere, to take getting knocked down or beat up, get up and keep practicing and put yourself in a position to be more successful. You don't have to really win for that. That winning's a bonus.
I was a fat ninth grader, and my uncle, Leonard, was the first state place winner in the history of Cleveland Heights. And my dad wrestled for Shaker. And I didn't know wrestling. Wrestling was like, coming off the turnbuckle. And so I went to my dad, and then Leonard came over, and I was talking about football, and I really wanted to be a better football player. They both said wrestle. And so I went and I met with Coach I, and he looked at me like, okay, this chubby little kid, So he says, come on out. And I did, and I was the worst kid on the team. But I learned quick. I learned, it was grit, initially, but it got my core strength incredible. It made me a much better football player. And then it also made me a better baseball player, a better golfer. I mean, all my hip strength, all my core strength just translated to the 4 sports I lettered in at this high school. So it was pretty cool. Yeah, it was Coach I and Kirk Morgenstern, who I absolutely love. I just had dinner with him and his wife, Joni. We reminisced. We hadn't seen each other in like 30 years. So, but Coach I was obviously the head coach, and he was coming into the golden age. We had Ricky Stone on the team, Ricky Sorkin on the team, David Fischer. I wrestled with Ricky Stone every day. So got me great, I wasn't Ricky Stone's caliber, but it got me a lot better. And so Ricky was a state champ. I was a freshman when Mark Hawald was there, our first state champ in any sport. And he was our idol, and we all wanted to be Mark. First of all, he was a stud. I mean, he just was a stud. But more importantly, he overcame something that was amazing. He lost a kidney, I think. I think it was a kidney, yeah. As a junior, came back and won the state title. And he was just a beast. He just outworked everybody, and he was solid, didn't make mistakes, and he had a hell of a pancake. So you just looked up to him. To have that as a freshman, to be able to look up to your first state champion in the history of our school, and it was our sport. It was pretty cool. Well, I came into the golden age. We took 4th in the state in 1979. I was the assistant coach. We had Stu Smiley on the team. Richie Harris almost made state. He's altered the state. We had Tommy Weiss, David Sternberg, Butch Lapsley, Jeff Tolan, Michael Goldberg. All these guys placed. David Sternberg was a 2-time state champ. Tommy made the state finals. Butch made the state finals. Michael made the state finals. Your father was there. He was a young guy. So we had some really, talented guys. We took 4th, 5th, and 7th in the state the 3 years I was there. So I coached in the golden era as the assistant coach. And then after that, completely the opposite in 1987 when I took over the program. We had 1 kid in the program, K through 12. I literally rebuilt the program with your dad, with Michael Goldberg, with Jeff Tolan. We all came together really as a family, and took a program from literally nothing, ready to be disbanded. 1 kid, James Gilmore, to what your dad did was 4th in the state, I believe, in 1994. So in 7 years, we went from literally nothing to that. And then again, in 14, I took over a program that was decimated as well. Dugan Bentley had left to go to his alma mater, and left pretty much the cupboard was bare. No disrespect to Dugan, he had to take his life ambition, and we rebuilt that program again. Brought in the perfect coach right now, Jimmy Greenwood, and turned it over to him in 17 and retired. I thought, but it was another rebuilding program that gave me a lot of satisfaction. But during the rebuild, the first rebuild, we had Aaron Grossman and Chad Silverstein and Brian Zeid and your uncle Ryan Peters, who was he was the horse. Everybody wanted to be Ryan, so he was the Mark Hawald of that generation. Yeah, and then the last era that I coached, we had Josh Bialosky, who made state, and we had like a little bit of a lull there, and he was also the guy, that everybody kind of wanted to be like. We had some hard workers too, Paul Jacobs. I mean, the Henry boys, we had a bunch of guys in there that, they weren't super talented, but they were hard workers, and they were indicative of what I was like as a coach and wrestler. Well, it's interesting. It's not so much me wrestling, but I was in the room when Jimmy Carr, Rick Sanders, who was an Olympic silver medalist, Jimmy Carr made the Olympics, Doug Weiss, Mark Hawald, I think Alan Kraus was there, and they were all going at it. They were all going. The fur was flying everywhere. I was a freshman, and I was watching this. I'm like, well, this is a pretty cool sport when I could see an Olympic silver medalist, all in the same room, in that little room, Beachwood. So that, to me, was the best memory as a Beachwood wrestler. As a Beachwood coach, was different. Well, there's a couple. One is when Butch Lapsley beat the Kali guy from Coventry at the districts, and he had just beaten Ricky Sorkin the year before in the state finals, and Butch, I think, was a sophomore. And anytime Butch got on the mat, people went crazy for that twine. It was fantastic. People go like, Butchie, 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 it was phenomenal. And then, when Michael Goldberg made the state finals, it was like, I don't know, I was almost like, it was like an out-of-body experience that I was wrestling with him. He got beat. We didn't know what the heck the tilt was, but at the end of the day, to know that can happen, chills. Yeah, so Coach I really was a wrestling father. He and I just bonded immediately, and I had the honor of coaching with him twice, both at Beachwood and at Brush, and I really learned a lot from him. But there was a community there that we were able to build and change lives. And I just saw the article about Coach I from Michael Goldberg, and that was very indicative. And I had the honor of wrestling with Michael every day when he was in high school, and I was his assistant coach. And what Coach created, that community, gave me the impetus to know, hey, maybe I can do this. And so that is something I'll never repay. There's no way I can repay that. I think, I was a grinder. So as a wrestler, I wasn't great. I was good-ish, but people saw the work I put in, and then the progression I made just by hard work. Because I wasn't a very athletically talented, gifted guy, but I got everything out of it, and I was there, and I grinded. I banged heads. I remember Jeff Sorkin pulling my hair out, and we're banging heads, and I probably had 3 or 4 concussions in the sport, and so I think maybe that was my contribution, because it sure wasn't being on the podium. Just it's an absolute pure labor of love. It's for the love of the community that I loved, I grew up with. My backyard was the high school. The love of the sport, the love of the coaches, particularly Coach I, Tony DiCarlo, that gave me the opportunity to do this, and also to their love, particularly Coach I, and also the assistant coaches that came into the family. I mean, just phenomenal human beings. Antonio Nicholson, your father, Michael Goldberg. I just love these guys and what they meant to the kids too. So, and of course the children. This building does not exist unless it's the children. And if you're not focused on your wrestler, don't do it. Leave the room. Yeah, so I get a lot of calls during the year from former athletes. Coach, hey, I got this I got to talk to you about, business-wise, personal-wise. So becoming that confidant, there's no greater compliment. And so coaching really is the ecosystem and the core of who I am in business, as well as obviously athletics. But in my life, it's been an honor to be able to be that person. and I take it with high respect, and it gives both the individual that's calling and the individual that's giving a lot of dignity. Be all in. Don't just try wrestling. Do and be wrestling.
The 80s started off with David Sternberg becoming our first two-time state champ. Included in that was some of the biggest heartbreak I ever saw in my life, even to this day. And that includes Tommy Weiss being by far the best wrestler in the state in 1980 in his weight class, and somehow not placing. Just, it was unimaginable. And I cried when he lost. And I was a freshman, he was a senior, and he was one of my heroes, and he lost in the quarters. And if Tommy wrestles that guy 150 times, I don't even know if he could lose to him ever again. So then we started a series of heartbreaking losses. In 81, that was the year that Michael Goldberg and Jeff Tolan and Butch Lapsley were seniors. And somehow Jeff Tolan, who I think was officially the toughest kid in the world, didn't make state. Michael Goldberg made the state finals unbelievably. I put it all together and way exceeded his abilities, but it was all attitude and toughness. And he was tough, and he was mentally tough. And so, but then he gets to the finals, and it was heartbreak. And Butch Lapsley that year in 81 was wrestling his biggest rival, a kid who he was better than. He was better than. He was just, there was no question. He beat him in the district finals, and he beat him in the All-Star meet the week after the states. But he lost him in the state finals. He got pinned in the state finals. And again, I was in the stands, and I put my head down, and I could not stop crying. So that's, and that year, 81, was my sophomore year. I made districts, and I beat the Brakeman's #1 kid. I beat him first round, and then lost my next match, so he was eliminated. Like, that was the most uplifting thing of the end of that season. But then the next year, I was, in my mind, I was good enough to win the state title. There was a kid from Chanel who I had never beaten, and he had never lost to me. And he was my rival, John Ryba. And I was in the match to make state. Both of us, ironically, got beat at district. So I was wrestling a kid, and I was beating him 4-0. He was out of injury time because I was just putting a complete pounding on this kid, and he was cranking on his arm, and it was a domination. It was not a match. And I was on top where I was strongest, and there was 39 seconds left in the match, and he did what everybody did. He reached up to grab my head and pull me over the top. I had 2 boots in, and what I would do is I would lower my head like that so people would reach up, and then I could sink the half in deeper and really crank on him. But he caught the back of my headgear with his fingers, and I couldn't. My chin strap was. I couldn't get out. I couldn't get loose, and I went over to my back, and I heard them counting, and I knew I was giving up 5, so I knew I had to get off my back and escape it to tie it up and put it in overtime. And I got to my feet. I got off my back, up to my feet, and literally escaping, and time expired, and I was out. It was a crushing blow. So even though the 80s were very exciting, there was a lot of success, right? There was a lot of heartbreak too. The program here, I think the reason it meant so much was because the program here, when you came to the gym, it was a full gym, and there was a lot of screaming people, and you'd come running out of the locker room, and they had this ring with black and yellow streamers, and come out to Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run. Man, we'd come ripping through there, and people would go crazy. But that was at the beginning of the 80s. And then by the time I was a senior, it really wasn't that. That was just 3 short years later. And then the next year was Coach I's last year. And then we had a couple different coaches. And even though, like I said, we had a remnant of great wrestlers still here with Schneider and Krantz and Bornstein and Josh Anderson, it wasn't the same. It was a different place, and the energy level was different, and the coach that came in, nobody knew, and he was a good guy. His name was Mickey Bates, and he was a good guy, and he was doing his best to restore it, but he didn't know what it was. He didn't know what the tradition here was, and that was the end of the tradition. It died in '84, and so It was a fun place to be, like in the late 70s, early 80s. It was exciting. It was, we'd come to the matches as a middle school kid, and I was screaming my head off for kids I didn't even know. I didn't know who they were, but I heard other people screaming, and I was screaming their names, and I wanted to be that so badly. I think the wrestlers, the basketball team was a very good basketball team on a local level. Didn't do much on the state level, but our wrestlers, they were as tough as anybody in any division. We had a heavyweight named Brad Herzog, and he spent his first several years of wrestling just getting tortured by anyone and everyone. And then he wanted to quit wrestling, and Ryan called me and said, "Can you talk to Herzog? He's quitting." And I'm like, "The hell he is." And so I called him, and Brad and I talked on the phone for probably 45 minutes, way more than he wanted to. He just wanted a way out. But I told him, "Listen, you've been putting all your work into it. You're finally going to enjoy some success, and now you're going to walk away? That's literally self-torture." We're at the first tournament of the year, and puts it all together, and he finishes third, and he pinned probably 3 or 4 guys in that tournament, and he had a match. I think the match for third and fourth was the big match, and it was a tough match, and he pulled it out, and I remember just being ecstatic for that kid. Jordan Lipp winning the state title as a freshman, undefeated freshman, I have goosebumps just thinking about it. And then Kevin coming in the next year, taking Jordan's spot. And he had to wrestle Braxton Scaletta in the state championship. Linsker, I could pick any one of his big matches. Well, any one of his big matches that he won, they were huge. His state finals match against Hurley was probably the best kid in the country that year. I think there was about 30 seconds left in the match, and Michael was down 7-4, which was 1 point better than it finished in the district finals the week before. Hung in there, and the strategy was that you got to wear him down. If you want to have a chance to beat him, you got to wear him down late in the match. Michael wanted to spladle him in the worst way. That was Michael's signature move, and you couldn't hit it on him because his coaches were screaming, "Watch the spladle, watch the spladle, watch the spladle." But if you got him tired, maybe you could take his mind off him. So Michael made him work for everything he had, and 30 seconds left, the kid takes a shot and just sat on that shot a little bit, much longer than he does normally. Normally it's shot and finish is one thing, but locked up his spladle and never worked so hard to turn a kid with it. The kid was not going to go. He knew if he went, it was over, and Michael just willed it over, and he got the pin. He didn't need the pin. He would have beaten by a point. I couldn't even handle that match. I couldn't sit in his corner because I was no longer officially a coach, and so I went up to the top of the mezzanine because I had to be alone. And I was literally, when he hit that spladle, I was gone. It wasn't even in this planet. Those were huge moments. Chad Silverstein made state as a sophomore. That match was insane. He had no business winning that match, and he won it, and everybody mobbed him on the mat afterward. The list goes on and on. Yeah, your uncle, Ryan, making state as a freshman in the finals of sectionals, or in the finals of the sectionals, no, his sophomore year. In the finals of the districts, he wrestled an undefeated senior who had no intention of losing to a sophomore. And this kid showed Ryan no respect. He, cheap shots, dirty dirty, he just wrestled dirty, treated him like he was, and it was a barn burner. I mean, I think the final score was 13-11 or something, and Ryan came out on top, and that was an amazing match. I had a lot of heroes. David Fischer was you really couldn't get a good look at him because he was just a flash, and he was such a nice guy. He was so humble and such a good person. And then Al Saransky started dating my sister. Oh, he was just the coolest thing there was. And I had a wrestler that was coming over all the time, and I felt like he was coming over for me. I never really got to see Ricky Sorkin, but his legacy lived on in the room because I guess he had a very punishing style of wrestling. His aura was always around. And then, for sure, when I was in high school, Tommy Weiss and David Sternberg were the seniors and the captains, and they were the 2 best wrestlers in the state. And then in the grade below them, we had Michael Goldberg and Butch Lapsley and Jeff Tolan and the Kravitzes. I looked up to everybody. Everybody had something for me because I felt like everybody had something on me. They were better than me at a lot of things. So I wanted to be like them. My relationship with Coach I, everything that I learned from him on the mat, in the room, attitude-wise, right from wrong. Every single lesson that a person could learn, I learned it from him. He was the single most important factor outside of my parents. And if my parents would tell me something, it didn't mean that much. But if he told me the same exact thing, it was the most important thing. I think some of my favorite moments, really, like moments alone with Coach I. Driving down to state my senior year, it was just me and Coach I, and hearing stories from Coach I it was always my favorite thing. Just being with Coach I was, I mean, if I had to pick one thing that was my favorite thing about wrestling at Beachwood in all the years, my favorite thing was spending just time myself and Coach I. I loved that more than anything. And I still remember all the stories he told me, and I guarantee you I know more stories than anybody with the possible exception of his son, Mike. And I treasure the fact that I have those stories still with me, and those experiences with me, and Coach I is still with me. And I think that's probably the single biggest hallmark of my enjoyment, my pleasure in Beachwood Wrestling. My contribution in Beachwood Wrestling. Well, I think I was constantly pursuing the greatness of the guys that came before me. Mark Hawald, Ricky Stone, Dave Fischer, Ricky Sorkin, Jerry Levine, and then Tommy and David. It was there in front of me. There was David Krantz, who was a great wrestler. But David was like a hero of mine in so many ways. He was a hero in life to me. He was a dear friend. He treated me like a brother. And he was a great student, and he was a great person, and he was a great wrestler. My big impact, I hope, was that when I left the school, I left something for the younger kids to aspire to. There were some good kids in the room when I left. There was Hal Tolan, who was tough as nails. There was Mark Schneider and Daniel Bornstein and Stuart Krantz and Josh Anderson, and all those kids were really, really great wrestlers. And so I hope I left them with something to aspire to. As far as a lasting impact, I don't know. Maybe it ends with the last kids that were in school with me. I don't know. Where I think my biggest contribution comes in is I sort of bridged the two worlds. After I graduated the next year, Coach I left Beachwood. Not teaching, but coaching. I tried to keep coming back and keep those guys inspired. I worked out with them when I'd come home for weekends and things like that. When I graduated from college, I came right back and started coaching because Peter Cimoroni basically sold me a bill of goods, but it was the best bill of goods I've ever been sold. It was a true bill of goods. And so I brought the Ohio State knowledge and college wrestling knowledge to Beachwood, and we trained those kids like that. And Pete gave me free, even though Pete was the head coach, he gave me free run of the pen with regards to teaching technique and conditioning the kids. And so we had a beautiful thing, and I think we made a much bigger impression on the kids that way than I did alone as a wrestler. And then when Pete left and I took over, then it was my stamp that was going on these kids. When I say it's my stamp, it really has Coach I all over it. The way we ran a practice and the attitude and the toughness that we preached, it all came down to Coach I. That's really where it all started, and that's where it all ended. So obviously, I'm still involved in wrestling, so it's had a major impact in my life. It's probably been the single biggest force outside of my religion, but for most of my life, it was my religion, and it influenced me and affected me in every imaginable way. Everything from first and foremost is work ethic. Second was probably the recognition of how to achieve success and how to go after it. And when you feel success like that, you want more. You're inspired to accomplish more. And that leads to the realization, or the successive realization of your goals, your smallest and your biggest goals in life. And so wrestling has been a huge impact on me. And Coach I's influence was always there and remains there. I think the sport of wrestling, if you let it grow organically and you go with it, you ride the wave, you become a much stronger person. You become stronger intellectually, you become stronger physically for sure, you become stronger emotionally, and I think you develop a lot of strength and a lot of knowledge from the sport. You understand how things work from the ground up. you feel like there's nothing you can't do because you have all the tools. The tools, you go find somebody who knows more than you about it, and you bring them in, and then you put your attitude and your hard work into it, and somewhere along the line, you have the product. Wrestling does that for you throughout life, and life throws a lot of left hands and a lot of right hands and a lot of uppercuts. It's good to be strong so you can handle those when they come.
I got started at a very young age. I started wrestling at the age of 4 or 5 years old. I started in the Beachwood Recreation Department. It's interesting because Bob Bloom, who was part of the first wrestling team at Beachwood, happened to be my coach, and my brother, Scott Peters, was also, at that time, was involved in the youth program. He was helping, it was probably his first time ever coaching. So, and I also believe that maybe Mark Krawinski might have been coaching at that time too. We used to practice at the middle school, so I started wrestling there for, I think, 2 years, and then I ventured off to a program called Longwood, which was out in Twinsburg in Macedonia, and I competed with them all the way through my elementary school years and some of my middle school years. I really took an interest in wrestling because of my older brother, Scott Peters, who's 8 years older than me, and he really got me excited about the sport, and I was good at when I started. I was strong, I was fast, so I had a lot of success early on. I came into high school in 1988-89 season. We were at a point where Beachwood Wrestling was not in a good state, down to one wrestler, which was James Gilmore. And there was a time period where we were considering not going to Beachwood. My parents had bought a house in Moreland Hills. We were looking there. We were also looking at potentially a private school, just because Beachwood Wrestling was not good and I was an up-and-comer. And we eventually, obviously, Pete Cimoroni took over the program. Coach I was, at that time, was coaching at Brush. He brought in alumni. He brought in my brother, Scott. He brought in Michael Goldberg. I wrestled at the middle school level, and we had some good kids on at our middle school team. I graduated with 2 guys that were wrestled all the way through, which was Aaron Grossman and Steve Kalin, that we were tri-captains together. But the next generation was the generation. So Scott and Pete kind of sat me down and said, you're going to have to be the guy that kind of carries the torch and just do what we tell you to do. Don't ask any questions. They taught me to be an extremely hard worker. My mentality was be the first one in, last one out, work harder than everybody at all times. Don't let anything break you mentally, physically. Just go, 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 go. And I did that. And they brought guys in, college guys in to work out with me, alumni to work out with me. I got pushed. I was the first freshman state qualifier probably in over 20 some years. I didn't place my freshman year. Ended up taking second in the state as a sophomore, went into the state finals undefeated. And unfortunately, my junior, senior year, I got injured, blew out my shoulder, and wasn't able to compete. At that time, the era was coming together. So we had the likes of the Chad Silversteins and the Brian Zeids and the Scott Lances and the Adam Siegels and Brian and Paul Weissman and Jason Thomas, Kevin Borwick, Jason Reimer. They were all starting to come together, and we were coming together as a team. So we got good really quick. So you had your alumni that were coaching. You had Pete that was the head coach at that time, and then you had Michael Goldberg, Jeff Tolan, Scott Peters. And then we brought Mark Scripps in. My senior year, I didn't make state because I got hurt. You had Chad Silverstein and Aaron Grossman who made state that year. So they took us, and that was the next group. We really saw a lot of progress in those years. And then you had the class of '94, took fourth in the state as a team. At that time, I was leading by example, and I really pushed everybody. I took on a pseudo coaching role when I got injured and tried to push. But I believe my work ethic and my mentality really tried to help a lot of people out. Okay, so greatest memories is the friendships that I made. I created a lot of lifelong friendships. There are so many memories that I can just think of. We had a Royal Rumble in my basement when we were in when we were in high school, going to the state tournaments and even going out to dinner. These are memories that you'll never forget. These are friends that are mine for life. Over the years, I've even developed stronger relationships with the Lauren Rabnicks, Bernie Weisskopf, who was my coach as a youth, and I learned a lot from Bernie as a coach. All of the memories. There's not one single memory. I mean, you could cite that the state finals was a big memory. It's a memory I remember every day, think about it all the time. I do remember blowing out my shoulder at Cuyahoga Heights High School, and I remember blowing out my shoulder here. being in a hospital, trying to get my shoulder back in place, sprinting through the hallways, all the workouts, some of the crazy workouts. I remember sitting in the sauna at Scandinavian trying to lose weight. Those are good memories, but they're also, you know, hard memories. So obviously my older brother, Scott, was somebody I looked up to. I looked up to all of my coaches. I had a lot of respect. I still have a ton of respect for Pete and Michael Goldberg and Jeff Tolan. I looked, you know, at that time, I had known a lot about the history of Beachwood Wrestling. David Sternberg's. I heard all these stories about David Fischer and Ricky Stone and Sorkin and Butch Lapsley. So I knew the legacy. So those were guys that I did look up to. On a bigger level, right, outside of Beachwood, Alan Freed was a teammate of mine growing up. Alan Freed was the biggest name in Ohio wrestling. Alan and I used to go to Longwood together. We drove together. He was a 3-time state champ at Ed's, and he was a 4-time junior national champ, went on to Oklahoma State and won a national title. But I think Al was probably the biggest name that had an impact on me. But you always looked up to the Dan Gables, you looked up to those Iowa guys. Ohio State had some guys, the Kevin Randlemans and the Mark Colemans you looked up to. Our relationship, and I had known him since I'm 5, 6 years old. I was coming in the room at that time. So, you know, I knew that he was a very high energy coach, a very loving coach. I knew my brother loved Coach I. So I didn't get coached by Coach I, but I got advice from him. We became really tight with each other when I started coaching at Beachwood in 1996, 97 year. I had just graduated from Miami. I came in the room and I said, listen, I want to coach. And we did pretty well that year. We got 2 guys to state, and that's when we built a strong relationship. We were coaches together. We were contemporaries, and my fondness grew stronger and stronger. There were times where I was learning how to coach from Coach I, and he gave me a lot of flexibility to do what I wanted to do. Our relationships remain strong. I was with him today. And now the roles are different, right? So now I'm the director of athletics, and he is one of my coaches. I still use him as a sounding board. I ask for advice all the time from Coach I. One of the things that he taught me most as a coach is our history and our legacy. And you know, I've heard all the stories for many, many years. I've heard them from him, I've heard them from other people, but the legacy of Beachwood Wrestling is paramount to him. And so, you know, I feel obligated to continue as athletic director to keep his legacy alive, and the importance of what he wanted to build, which was a family, and he did. But all of our state qualifiers, all of our state place winners, all of our state champs, I have met every single one of them, which I'm proud to say. I have relationships with almost all of them, and that's important to me, and I think that's what Domenick gave to me, was these people are important to us. So my contribution is threefold. First, as an athlete, I kind of came into a role as a 14 or 15-year-old kid to reshape Beachwood Wrestling, to be committed to our program. Listen, I don't know if I don't come to Beachwood, if Ryan Peters is not there, does Aaron Grossman make state? Does Chad Silverstein wrestle? Right? Does Brian Zeid wrestle? Does Brian Chernett? Do any of these guys wrestle? My contribution at that time was, that they saw a work ethic, a tireless work ethic. They saw a mentality of never being able to break mentally. I don't think there was ever a time I would break mentally, and I think they saw that work ethic, that mentality, the drive to be the best. I think they saw that. They saw somebody reach a high level at a young age. I think my contribution as a coach, we had some fantastic years. We were a top 5 team in the state many, many times. In 2003, we were a state runner-up team. We were able to bring groups of kids together and make great teams. I think that was a combination of all of us. We had a nice gelling staff we balanced each other off really well. What I was able to give back was my work ethic, my passion for Beachwood Wrestling. And let's just talk about the next aspect is my contribution as an athletic director. Obviously, wrestling's been an important part of my life. I'm still heavily involved in wrestling. My son, Phoenix, is going into the 8th grade. We wrestle all year round, all the time. It's what makes us who we are. I was a coach of Elite, which was our youth program for many, many years. A lot of our stars came out of elite. I think that the contribution I gave and that we gave were to keep the legacy growing. And you know, so as athletic director, I think keep pushing the program and pushing where we want to be. I take the same approach that I took as a wrestler or even as a coach with all of our programs. So I do expect our teams to reach high levels of success. The other thing that I think I leave as a legacy is what Coach I wanted. You know, this project that we're working on for this room, to leave everything that he contributed to the program, which is all of these guys on these walls, all of the kids that have come through the programs. And I hope we pay an amazing tribute to Domenick for his 60+ years of service to Beachwood Wrestling and showcases the beautiful history of Beachwood Wrestling. I don't think there's a day that goes by that the word wrestling is not discussed, talked about. I think the sport of wrestling, you know, kind of sets you aside in the mere fact that there's only one way I know how to become great, and that is to work hard and do things right. You have to live your life right. You have to work hard, and you got to be focused and dedicated. It impacts my life every day. Every move I make, I don't even know how to describe it. You walk around as a wrestler. So it's really the fabric of our family. Unfortunately, Phoenix has a lot of pressure. He is an awesome kid. He works hard. I want Phoenix to be able to take away from this sport the lessons of life, right? So you have to be an amazing teammate. You have to be the first one in. You have to be the last out. You have to show gratitude towards your coaches. And appreciation to your coaches, and to be a really good person, to take care of others, to understand that there is higher levels of success, and you just got to keep climbing. If you don't reach your level of success that you want, you don't pack it in, you get back up and you keep climbing. The crazy part about wrestling is you never reach your pinnacle, right? We're in the midst of watching the Olympics, and they're world champions. They're still striving to be the best. And they've reached the pinnacle. I mean, we've seen them. You always are trying to be a better person. You're trying to improve yourself. It's all about self-improvement. This is a hard sport. This is not a sport for everybody. I will tell you, I think everybody should try the sport of wrestling. This sport will make you stronger forever, mentally, physically, emotionally. There won't become an obstacle in your life that you'll be scared of. You have to go into it 100% and work hard. Put extra time in. You can't get great at the sport unless you put a lot of extra time, and that means getting up early, staying up late, doing things during your free time to make yourself better. Just getting better each day. You can't worry about the wins and the losses.
New student at Beachwood in middle school, weighing 60 pounds and limited options from a sports standpoint. Saw wrestling, didn't know what it was, thought I'd give that a shot, and rest was history from there. Yeah. Head coach in middle school at Scott Peters was our coach, and he followed us to the high school and became our coach there. Had a number of assistants, Scripps and Tolan, and Coach Iammarino joined us later as well. Pete Cimoroni was the head coach for 2 years, and then Scott came in. I think a good era for the sport of wrestling, especially in Ohio and Cuyahoga County, and hotbed of wrestling back then, early mid-90s. Well, we had a lot of rivalries within our conference in the MAC 8 back then, so it was a good time for the sport. Making state for the first time, and kind of getting that monkey off your back and accomplishing goals. That was a big part of what we used to do. Is we had big goals, but we had small goals. And hitting those goals and the memories of that are what comes to my mind for sure. I lost in the state finals by a couple points to a returning state champ, and it was close, so I fell a little bit short. But so didn't get the ultimate goal. But some of the older guys on the team that I was watching, mostly Brian Peters at the time, was a couple years older than me and contending for state titles, and I looked up to him and his work ethic, and tried to model a lot of my effort, the way he did it, as well as the coaching staff, all the coaches. Well, I always looked up to Coach I. I mean, he was just a model of the sport. He was actually coaching at some of, I want to say he was at Orange for a year and maybe Brush when we were in high school. So he actually coached against us in a couple matches. So I learned, I think it was our senior year, that he was coming back on board, and I was thrilled about it. I think the people, they were worried, mixed feelings, and he was coaching against us, and now he's coming in. But I was from the get-go just super excited about having Coach I on our team and part of the program again. And, he was one of our teachers as well, so got to talk a little bit of wrestling in the hallways. And he brought a lot of energy and enthusiasm to the room. There was no outside world. It was just, wrestling, and that was the way the focus was. And I learned when I did make the state finals that we had a number of coaches and assistant coaches at the time, and I was excited when they told me it was going to be Scott and Coach I in my corner. So I was very excited about that. Really wish I could have delivered and brought home a title. There hadn't been one in many, many years at that point in '94. So, but it was great having Coach I in my corner. I guess my contribution is, and kind of looking around the room, I haven't been here in a while, but there was a bit of a gap here, in placers and, state qualifiers and that kind of thing. So I think, we kind of jump-started that. If you look back in history, there was a few guys, but, I think we really helped that early 90s team really helped, I think build the program up. So I'm proud to be, one little part of that. Self-confidence, not arrogance or cockiness, but a true belief that you can accomplish just about anything that you put your mind to. Wrestling teaches you that from a young age, whenever you start, and you get out what you put in, and that's just a life lesson. It's true in family and business and everything in your life. And it started for me with wrestling. I attribute a lot of things that have gone well for me professionally and at home to building up self-confidence, and knowing what you can do, deep down, if you put your full effort into something. Well, first advice I'd give you, and I've heard this so many times throughout the years of fellow, classmates and younger, students as well, is they always say, I really wish I wouldn't have given up. A lot of people do the sport and they, there's bumps and bruises along the way for everybody. I say just stick with it. I don't know anyone that regrets having stuck with it. I know so many people that regret, giving it up.
Started in the sport of wrestling in 7th grade when I met Scott Peters. He came into our middle school cafeteria, asked who likes to have girls chase them, and said something like that. And a bunch of us raised our hand and we went and talked to him, and he brainwashed us and got us to come out for the wrestling team. And my greatest memory of Beachwood Wrestling is probably my state semifinals match, probably just because I was so fired up and I did well, and making the state finals was probably one of the coolest moments that I had in my career. Also winning the All-Star meet and going to nationals, that was really cool, the high school national tournament. I got to work with Coach I for maybe a year or two when he joined Beachwood when Scott was coaching, and he worked a lot with little guys. And I think, again, I was kind of under Scott's wing. And, I think one of the hardest moments I had in Beachwood Wrestling was probably when Scott brought the alumni in for the districts week and just had guys just come in and just crush us. And I remember going downstairs in the locker room and just being beaten up. And he came down to see if I was okay, and then just said, get back up there. And it was pretty hardcore. And also when I quit because I hated losing weight, and him and Pete told me just to come back and not lose weight. So that was an easy switch. And thank God, it went really well. I think for my biggest inspiration, it was probably Ryan and Scott. I really looked up to them, and they really motivated me, and I saw them doing everything that they were telling me to do. And so, I believe in that. I believe it's important that you don't guide others. I don't think you can guide others farther than you've gone yourself. So I think that's something that these guys walk the walk. So they're pretty inspirational. Scott's probably had the biggest impact on my life. So as a coach, as a best friend, as a mentor, and as a brother. So I think that relationship 30 years plus years later is still pretty special. My contribution to Beachwood Wrestling, it's been tough because I haven't been connected to it in quite some time, but I think just the legacy of just what our team was able to kind of leave behind, and the memories that we all have. And then if we saw each other today, we'd all give each other big hugs and have a great time hanging out, which unfortunately I missed when everybody got to come back for Coach I. I think overall wrestling is shaped my entire mindset, my entire life. I used to do things in my business, like have brackets up on the walls for competition. And I've just always had that nonstop mentality that I can always do more than I probably think I can when I first start. So the sport definitely helped me with that.
I started off in middle school, 7th grade. All my friends growing up played basketball, so I followed suit. And going into 7th grade, I was one of the smaller kids in my school. David Sternberg, the middle school coach at the time, he went around in the cafeteria trying to recruit some wrestlers. And he came to my table, and everyone's like, oh, basketball, basketball, the typical. And he looks at me like, you're a little guy, like, you have no future in basketball. And then he started trying to question, like, our toughness. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. I'm tiny. I weigh 100 pounds, or at that time, 80 pounds. So, yeah. So he kind of sold me on, you don't have to be big to wrestle. You know, obviously with my friends would always be wrestling around anyway, so it was just like a natural transition. But entering high school, you've heard of so much success and all the legends and the past wrestlers, like making state, winning state. So it was kind of cool to be a part of that, because Beachwood Wrestling is probably the most successful program there is. And so just being part of it and looking up to these seniors and these past alumni that had come back at Thanksgiving break and winter break, and it was just cool to be a part of it. So it was really just one of those. Beachwood, I feel like we were a small school, and it was hard for teams like football and soccer to be good. So individual sport, it was awesome that we can kind of be the leaders of the pack and had that much success. Obviously not cutting weight, so that was probably the worst memory. I just love being part of the team and part of the family, wrestling family. All those extra times sitting around in the locker room, after practices, on the mats, it's just awesome. It's just like you grow such a special bond, traveling to different tournaments with your teammates, just going to wrestling camps and experiencing all the extra stuff outside of wrestling is awesome. And I think that's what makes it one of the better sports. It's just your bond with teammates. You go through such hard work, so it's like you get to experience, like it's maybe like more like the military. They put you through such tough, task that when you're coming out of it, it's just you grow tighter from it. In high school, obviously, it was Coach I was the main guy, and then obviously Ryan Peters came along, and he was younger, and he was the one that motivated us and pushed us. So those two people were probably the most beneficial in my life for a wrestling career. Coach I, he was just, I feel like he was more the CEO. We called him our Italian grandpa. He wasn't the coach that was on the mat and showing us moves, or he wasn't the one on the track, making us run sprints. He was more of like, he just cared about us. I think that was the biggest thing we took away. We were pushed so hard, and they demanded excellence from us, but he cared about us, and he just wanted to talk to us as more of a friend than a coach. And it was just so awesome that all these coaches just want to push you in the sport of wrestling. And when you have someone like the yin and the yang, that you can go talk to him. And him being in the school, being our teacher, it was just great throughout the day. You can just go talk to him about anything, and he cared about us and just wanted to see us do well, obviously in wrestling, but also in our personal life. He's such a good resource to have in high school when you're going through, so many changes in an awkward stage of life. There's another family member you can lean on, and obviously he has so much wisdom. He's been around forever and so respecting the community. So just talk with him about everything. But obviously he loved talking wrestling, so you can talk to him for hours about wrestling, the history, and even now when I see him, he just loves talking about old high school times and matches, and you obviously talk to him forever about it, and it's a great thing to have. Beachwood Wrestling is not known for one move or one type of style. If you look back throughout the history of Beachwood Wrestling, there's so many different wrestlers, and they had their unique funkiness. Scott Heller, he had his cradles, Linsker spladles, Seth Preisler shin whips. He was just so consistent. We knew Coach I would always be there. He wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel. He had a successful program, and he just fit everyone into it. So it was just so consistent, and he just cared for us. He was a teacher in the building, and my non-wrestler friends, was their favorite teacher. They weren't wrestlers, but he had such a good personality, and he was fun, and everyone wanted to be in Coach I's class. And then he really tried to make us as like a family. So after every wrestling match, tournaments, we'd go out to eat as a team, and that really helped us grow as a team. Most people don't think about off the mat, that's so beneficial to being such a successful team, but we'd go to Tasty Pizzas after every home match, and those kind of memories that just really last forever. I'd hear all the stories from the older alumni that would talk about he would throw people in the walls and he would yell, but I got to see him a little later in life, and he's obviously tempered down a little, and he was kind of the softer side. Our other coaches would push us hard, but Coach I, he couldn't watch us sprint. So he'd after the practice, and they would sprint us on the track every Tuesday and Thursday. Coach I would go shower, and he's like, I can't watch this. It's too hard to watch, because he had a soft side and just really cared about us. When he was coaching us, we thought Coach I maybe had 5-10 more years, and he's been doing this forever. And we're 25 years later, and I have a son who's going to 7th grade, and it's so cool that, you know, he might be coaching my son next year. I would never imagine that that would be an opportunity. Experience a special bond with my son, having the same coach, and he's molded me into the person I am today, and he can have, you know, the same thing, be able to coach my son, which is a really cool experience. And then another memory for Coach I is beginning of the season every year, we'd go do warm-ups and try to get back in shape. And the first practice, he would always bring out this old school this instrument and do our body fat check. And he'd bring us one by one into his office, and he would start grabbing our fat and he'd weigh us. And he would just, we would always joke, like, he has no idea what he's doing. He's just pinching fat, and he'd be like, yeah, you can lose 10 pounds, or you can lose 15 pounds. And he's usually pretty accurate, but like back then we didn't have all the computers and all the different things to calculate it that they do now with the hydration test. But it was funny. We'd always joke, like, Coach I has no idea what's going on, but he did have a madness to his science. And one last story, we were at States my junior year, and one of my teammates, Scott Heller, didn't make weight. And an hour later, Heller went up to Coach I. He's like, all right, Coach, we're good. And Coach I had no idea how Heller made weight. And he'd always knew there was some funny business up. And Coach I to this day would always ask me, like, Jason, I know you had something to do with this. Did you weigh in for him? But Coach I just want to let you know, I'll never tell you. Yeah, obviously, Beachwood Wrestling as a whole is so big. It's not one person is responsible for the whole history. I'm just a piece of it. When I was, entered high school, usually the two seniors made state, and that was usually, for a while how it went. So I made state as a sophomore, and once that happened, it brought some younger guys in that started doing the same. And instead of having the two seniors make states and start placing, we started building more of a team and getting more success at the state level. And hopefully, the younger guys kind of saw how hard I worked and all the time I put into it, and try to lead by example. And hopefully, they saw that and it carried over. And then obviously now that I'm much older and have younger kids, I help coach the elite program to help feed into the next generation. So I try to give back, that way is, help the young kids, and hopefully they can find the passion that I did in the sport and carry on to high school and keep the tradition going. I really think wrestling is what made me the person I am today, like as successful I am in my actual career now. It just teaches hard work. And obviously the whole foundation's from wrestling. Like, they push you out of your comfort zone. It's just that work ethic carried me to where I am today. So it's obviously all based on wrestling. There's a great article about why you should hire a wrestler. We're a different breed, and we're wired a little different, and we're willing to push the extra mile to get a task done. And I feel like we have that mentality, is we're going to work harder than you and get the job done. We talk about this all the time, but wrestling will change your life. It really teaches you so many different things in the world to be successful. If you can go through wrestling, I think Dan Gable said, everything else is easy. It's such a true statement, because wrestling's such a good sport. It's not for everyone. There are some kids that come out and it's not for you. And I talk to the parents, and I agree. You can't push someone into wrestling. Over time, you'll learn to love it, but you want to wrestle. If you give wrestling a chance, it can pay off in so many ways down the line, because it teaches you so many value lessons, and it really is the best sport in the world.
I got involved in the sport of wrestling when I was about 8 years old. I watched big-time wrestling, WWF, WCW, and wanted to give it a try. And so I went out for the Beachwood Recreation Team, and then transitioned thereafter to Longwood YMCA after meeting Bertie Weisskopf. It was a family affair. We were all friends outside of wrestling, and I talked to the Lipps, Jason Miller, Lon Peltz, Matt Taub, a lot of the wrestlers to this day. Unfortunately, only outside of school was I a really good student, and I was a good student of wrestling. I would literally study tapes. Like, I would know what happened in every match, every detail, going out of bounds, going back to the center, and really, really watch what other wrestlers did, what their first move was, all of those things, and try to invent things for myself, pick coaches' brains. I was really into live wrestling. I wasn't as good at drilling, which there's a lot of benefits to drilling. I just was more into live wrestling and really studying people wrestling live and inventing moves and doing things like that. Obviously, every wrestler's gonna, that's won a state championship's gonna say that memory was pretty fantastic. I was a little more unorthodox, so, when you fall the wrong way, sometimes somebody could capitalize off of falling the wrong way. I probably let a couple matches get a little too close, and won several of the matches, and the last second. Some of the biggest matches in my career, even to start my career, even as a freshman to make the state tournament, I was losing, I don't remember, 14-6 or so when I pinned the guy to then get myself in the match to then make the state tournament. I still remember the Kenston finals, losing I think 9-6 with a few seconds left, trying everything in the world to take him down, and I ended up taking him down to his back. So I was definitely a heart attack for the coaches, and due to my style of wrestling, rolling across my back quite a bit, wrestling such close matches. I definitely looked up to my coaches, Ryan, Coach Lazar, Lauren, Coach I, definitely inspiration there, and I'd wrestle during the summers and the off season, and I looked up to those wrestlers. I would always try to pick things up from other wrestlers and other coaches, try to feed off of all that and make my own little collage of different coaches, their ideas, their thoughts, and other wrestlers and their, moves and whatnot, implement them into what I was doing. If I had to look at it from a broad scope, I was the first state champ in 20 years. So I started a new era of state champions, I'd say. And I just tried to work hard in the off season, give 100%, and also support my teammates. Huge effects on my professional life. From the first time I walked into an office, being in real estate and trying to put together deals, I can make so many parallels to wrestling. And from a hard work aspect, just walking into the office and seeing who I wanted to be and what that guy's accomplishing and how much is he making. Oh, I want to make double him, I got to work twice as hard as him, and get on the phone. And I was making a lot of cold calls and trying to put deals together. And from a actual practical standpoint, you think about chain wrestling, putting one move together, single. If the single doesn't look, go to a duck under, go to a high crotch. That's the way a deal works. That's the way trying to sell real estate works. Hey, you looking to sell your building? No, you're not looking to sell. Are you looking to buy a building? Are you looking to, are you having trouble managing your property? Do you need to, try to find somebody's pain area, try to find where you can help them, try to convince them where they need help. That I can compare to chain wrestling, just trying one thing, then another, then another. Like when you're down at the end of a match and you just have to try a bunch of moves to see what'll work to try to win the match. I constantly identify myself professionally as a wrestler and trying to get what I want and trying to work hard for it and always trying to find a way to win. You have to learn from your losses. You have to know that there's a win in there in every loss. You have to know when you're a young wrestler that you're just putting all of your experiences in the bank for the future to pretty much cash in on it later. And sometimes it feels like you're not making improvements, but if you keep working hard, you'll look in the rearview mirror and see a lot of improvement. Some kids challenged me, they said I couldn't do it, and I just decided, well, let me at least give it a try. Also, my dad was a wrestler, I should point that out. And so we were at our peak. We took second in the state my junior year, and we just had phenomenal guys. It was awesome. That year we took second in the state, and just everybody was there, and the school came out, and it was just so proud. It was also the worst moment because we took second, but it was a good thing. Oh, there's just too many names to name. There's a guy, his name's Lauren Radnick. Unfortunately, he passed away. He was like the wild man coach of the team. He was great. And Evan Lazar, Michael Linsker, and just too many. There's too many. Oh boy. Oh man, he's just a never give up guy. I mean, he's still teaching to this day. He's still coaching to this day. He lives what he preaches. He just doesn't give up. I would say just being here, like all the guys before me, they came in, they just put in the time, and we stay positive, and we just love the sport. We love the team, just love school. There's one thing all wrestlers say is you always fight off your back, and whenever things are down, you just gotta fight off your back. When guys turning you to pin you, it's like you can't stop fighting. As soon as it's in your head that he's gonna pin you, that's when he pins you. And life has you down. As you get older, you get a lot of more difficulties than just in high school, but you just got to keep fighting. It's satisfying to fight off your back and win. So,
a guy named Bernie Weisskopf was my baseball coach, and I was at baseball tryouts, and my brother Kevin was running around, and Bernie saw Kevin and said, you must join my wrestling. And he did that, and then Kevin he started wrestling, he would come home and he would start beating me up. And I said, I cannot have my younger brother beating me up. That compelled me to join the sport of wrestling. It was a family. We were the cool kids. We were the tough guys. A lot of that, almost all of that, had to do with Coach I and his vision and really everything that he established here. It's really hard to condense it into one memory. Probably though, freshman year when Linsker and I both won a state title. That was really special. Oh, I was so lucky to just draw inspiration from so many amazing people. Definitely the coaches, between Coach I, Ryan, Scott, Coach Lazar. Equally so, some of the older guys on the team, Michael Linsker, Eric Adler, Seth Preisler, those guys. I just really wanted to be Jason Miller, as good as them at wrestling. Incredibly significant. I mean, I hated running. I wound up running cross country for 4 years just because Coach I was the cross country coach, just so I could be near him. And so did my brother, and so did Linsker, and Solomon even ran. So all of us just wanted to be close to Coach I because he was that important of a guy. I just think my contribution was that I worked really hard in the room every day, and iron sharpens iron. And when you just had a core group of us competing because we wanted to, out alpha, it wound up sort of creating a really tough and successful environment. I can look to just about everything that I have and make a direct or indirect connection to wrestling. Almost every friend that I've made, a ton of professional contacts, even my wife I indirectly met through wrestling. So it has certainly just given me so much and so many blessings. Have as much fun with the sport as you can and really focus on the connection that you have with your teammates and with your coaches and all the people around, because at the end of the day, that's the stuff that really matters.
I got involved in the sport of wrestling when I was 6 years old. I was at my brother's baseball game, and Bernie Weisskopf came up to me and he asked us if we wanted to wrestle, and next thing you know, I was brought to my first practice in Twinsburg at a place called Longwood, and I was hooked for life. Beachwood Wrestling, it was a family, and you can put that word on the wall and it doesn't mean much, but in every true aspect of the word, we were a family. We were a championship culture. We had our own way, and it was largely orchestrated by Coach I. It was 2003. We took second place in the state in the hotel lobby, and we were getting on the bus and ready to come home. And we get in the bus, and Coach I's got the second place trophy, or so we thought. And we're just about to leave, and another team that took second place started knocking on the bus door and holding our bus because something happened in the lobby and we ended up taking their trophy. It was the same thing, but it was a pretty funny way to end that whole weekend, and did the trophy swap, and then we came home. I was inspired by the whole coaching staff, but mostly inspired by Coach I, Lauren Rabnick, and Ryan Peters. At an early age, they taught me the way that Beachwood has done things for so many decades, and I was able to use what they instilled and have a really successful career doing it. He still has that constant reminder in my head of just what he taught, what he brought to the table, his work ethic, his determination. But what really stood out to me was his organization. He had great organizational skills. The team was always where we were supposed to be, and we were always ready to perform, just always ready to peak at the right time. I mean, I'm just one of the many that were fortunate enough to wrestle for Coach I and to learn his wisdom and his way to compete, and proud to do it to the best of my ability, be able to achieve so much. There's like a cliche quote that once you've wrestled, everything else in life is easy. It does ring as a constant reminder in my head, because being able to push yourself, being able to work to your fullest ability and stay working your hardest even when the chips are stacked against you, or when you can't have that drink of water you want or that candy bar you want. It does ring true that once you've wrestled for Coach I, everything else in life is easy. Listen to your coaches. They have your best interest at heart. They've done it before. They'll show you the way, and you win with good people.
I think I remember in second grade, somebody was handing out flyers, and I went home and asked my dad if I could wrestle, and he said yes. So we were really successful. We had a lot of state champs: Sammy Gross, Ryan Harris, Al Jacober, me. So very successful. Probably the year that me and Jacober got 6th place as a team, just me and him, in the state. That's probably my best memory. Definitely Coach I inspired me, and then Ryan Peters and Dugan Bentley. So Coach I was actually there for me my freshman year of high school. I was very undersized, and he would always get in my ear and tell me that I was one of the best wrestlers in the room, even though I was getting beat a lot. So that really helped me going forward in high school. Very significant. So just the values that go into wrestling that he would teach, I think help you later in life, just with everything that you do. I was a part of it since I was 5 until 18, so I 13 years, and spent a lot of hours in the wrestling room, working with the guys, and yeah, it taught me a lot of discipline. So, you know, with wrestling, you have to cut weight, you have to work out a lot, so discipline's important, and I've definitely carried that on into my professional life. Work hard, learn, stay humble. It's not an easy sport, so you got to really put a lot into it to get out what you want.
I was at recess in like pre-K, and Ryan Peters came to all the school and he handed out flyers, and he would go up to everybody, whether they looked athletic or not, and he said, "You look like you could be a good wrestler," and he handed out flyers, and everybody on the street started wrestling. I wrestled with Al Jacober, Ryan Harris, David Shapiro, Grant Blumenthal, Anthony Walden, Paulie Flowers, Al Ingersola. I worked out with Alex Dronzek a bit, but I was in junior high when he was in high school. We had a really good group of guys. We were a small team, but a lot of guys who really wanted to win. So my coaches were Dugan Bentley was our head coach, and our assistant coach was Mike Arnold. Adam Krawinski was there, Jeff Pelton, Tom Strawn, but mainly Dugan and Mike Arnold were the two staples all 4 years. I used to go every year to the state tournament with my dad, with Ryan Peters, and we used to go and watch. And you know, one specific memory, Ryan took me when I was in 8th grade, and he took me in the tunnel before the Shot and Scene Center to like get me comfortable there. But I think once you're there and get your hand raised, it's just like, I don't know, you kind of black out a little bit. It's insane. You know, one of my favorite memories is of, it wasn't really with Coach I, but at Beachwood Elite, the first day of practice, we had a push-up competition every day. You were in the memory. We lied to you too. It was you and your brother. You were like, I don't know, it had to be like 170 push-ups or something. And you're just like, who's left? And we're like, one more guy, just keep going. And he had quit like 50 push-ups ago. But I did like that. We used to do legs 6 inches in the air. And Ryan Peters would be counting down from 10. And he would hit 0 or 1. And everybody would put their feet down. And he'd be like, I never said put your feet down, up again. And there was always that one kid, and he would make us start over. It probably took us 20 minutes to get 10 seconds worth of 6 inches done. And I don't know, they were always focused on the positive mental attitude at a really young age. Beachwood Wrestling in particular was really focused on education. You know, you had Scott Peters, who was on the school board, and I remember I didn't finish my homework, and my mom brought me to practice, and coaches made me finish my homework in the corner before I could join everybody. But I think that was just the lessons they taught us, is like, you don't get to play until you finish your work. And I grew up in an era, so my best friend at the time was Ryan Harris, and he was like just an athletic specimen like no other for 6. He was like riding a 2-wheeler before I could walk. Like, he was just a freak athlete, and he was super strong, and he was winning every tournament. And he would win every tournament, and I would go 0-2, or I'd go 1-2, or I'd get pinned. I mean, there was this one, like, I got headlocked by the same kid like every week for like 2 months. And I just wasn't strong. I wasn't athletically built at the time. And my mom went to Scott Peters and said, hey, like, he stinks. I think we should cut him. And your dad's like, well, does he enjoy wrestling? And my mom's like, yeah, he loves it. She's like, okay, like, trust me, he's going to be a state champ. Just trust the course. And well, I think that's an important lesson, is because I didn't know the difference between winning and losing. I was just having fun. I was with my friends. I love the Bison game and the dodgeball and wrestling it with technique and doing everything in practice. And you know, I wasn't physically built yet, but I think once I started lifting weights, which was like around 6th or 7th grade, and I started getting physically developed, is when I started like seeing that I had put some good foundation in my wrestling ability. I don't know if Scott really thought I'd be a state champ, or he just says that to everybody. I have no idea. I mean, growing up, I looked up to Kevin and Jordan Lipp. They were like my heroes. When I got to high school, I don't know if I idolized anyone, but I think they were my heroes growing up. They were just so good. I mean, they were both like anytime. I mean, and they were going to the Ironman, and they were winning the state tournament, and they were getting recruited, and they were just like. I just remember watching the dual meets and going, and you could just see the fear in other people's eyes when they wrestled them. And I don't know, I also thought like they were unbeatable. You could tell he had a great mind in wrestling, and you know, he coached me in junior high, so I didn't get to spend, you know, as much time with him. I used to eat lunch with him too, and we would talk about his story. He remembers every single Beachwood wrestling match that he has ever seen, and we used to talk about it all the time. Just like to see his analytical mind was incredible, and you know, some of that he would bring into the practice room, and he was fun too. You know, I think I got a tamer version of Coach I, because I've heard stories of him, you know, being more of a scary guy. He wasn't scary when he coached us, but I think he was also really big. I mean, he would always like get really upset at me when I was cutting a lot of weight, and I think he kind of saw the bigger picture of being a better wrestler. I have a really young memory of Coach I. I just remember like Coach I loved his wrestlers. And I think Coach I was in 2nd grade, and during winter break, there was no Beachwood Elite practice, so we went and worked out with the high school. So like we would have a little, you know, 6 or 7 of us who would be working out at the same time as the high school. And I remember it was New Year's Eve, and Coach I was just like, you know, no questions asked, like, you guys need to be safe tonight. No getting behind the wheel drunk, no none of this. And I think, you know, at the time I was like, how could they drink? It's illegal. But you know, I learned that I think Coach I really, he understood what kids were going through in high school, and he wanted what was best for them. And I think I don't know why it sticks in my memory, but yeah, he loved his wrestlers. I think, you know, I brought a high pace and tried to bring everybody up. I think what was special about, and I can't take full credit, but I think the group of guys we had, we got dangerously close to making the state dual tournament. And I think just the level in the room of Ryan Harris, me, Anthony Walden, Gordon Hong, like all of these guys got elevated, I think. And I think it was because of just like this competitiveness in the room. To be successful in wrestling, I think you have to have an intensity, a little bit of an obsessiveness about you. And I think that has really transitioned to the work world. I think you know, my wife and I have a small company, and I think I try to bring that intensity. But also wrestling taught me how, I mean, especially at a really high level, whether it's at the collegiate level or the high school level, you can't focus 100% of your energy on wrestling because you will burn yourself out. And I think that has transitioned over into me knowing, hey, you can't work 24/7, you have to take a break. Expect hard work, expect to get beat, expect to lose and to be humble and be held accountable, but expect to have a work ethic.
Just like every other kid, started, you know, trying every sport when I was a little kid, you know, maybe 5, 6 years old, and my father wrestled as well, you know, growing up and in high school. So obviously, you know, he probably wanted me to get into it, but it seemed like I just, you know, had a passion for it right away and loved it. And so just stuck with that, and obviously played some other sports growing up, but wrestling was always, you know, my main passion for sports. It was good. I mean, we you know, we didn't always have a full team. When I was a youth wrestler, we had a lot of kids coming in, and you know, a lot really good youth club, and the high school was really successful at that time. And then, you know, as I continued to get older, we had, you know, at least a couple state placers, state champ, seemed like every other year. And then when I got to high school, you know, we kept the job up and continued to have some success down and, you know, at the state tournament in Columbus. So, you know, I would say overall we definitely did a good job of keeping the, you know, reputation of Beachwood wrestling at, you know, a high peak. And it was fun. It was a great time. I had a couple people that I looked up to a lot. I was real close with our head coach at the time, Dugan Bentley. Was always very close with Coach I. Very close with a couple of the guys that helped us out a lot, and Ryan Peters as well. But someone I used to look up to a ton that wasn't, much older than me was Kevin Lipp. And so I always enjoyed my time, working out with him and him helping me grow as a person and as a wrestler. And so, without his guidance, I don't know if I would have accomplished everything I did growing up in high school as well. So, it's funny because Coach I and I had a great relationship when I was in high school and in middle school, because I was one of the few people that probably followed wrestling outside of Beachwood very closely. Meaning, like, I knew where kids were transferring to, what weight class everybody was going, and that was something that Coach I, stayed on top of as well. And so, I remember back in high school, every day we would, meet at some point during the day, during school, or right before practice, and talk about the recent news we saw online. And, it was always a good, positive thing for me because, although you don't want to be talking about your competition all the time, just having like a fresh face of someone that, has that same passion of following, the wrestling world as you do. It's just fun. It keeps things different. It keeps you, involved in the sport as much as you can when you're not practicing and competing. And so it was always something I look forward to every day, was talking to him and seeing, his thoughts on the upcoming week and going from there. Growing up and having those older guys that I watched and looked up to, we had a good class that came up with me, and I think it was our responsibility to, keep Beachwood Wrestling as a great team. And so, a couple of us made it down to states a couple of times. At least, Sammy Gross and I made it every year. Each won a couple state championships. So, for the legacy of Beachwood Wrestling, I think he and I definitely did a great job of doing what we could to represent. Just the amount of people that I've met throughout my life of wrestling has definitely helped me in having that guidance of some of the people I've talked about earlier. Some of those people that I grew up wrestling with are still my closest friends to this day. And if I ever need advice, some of those people that I grew up watching when I was a young kid are the guys that I reach out to for advice. And so in the personal sense, it's been such a great experience for me because wrestling was such a big part of my life growing up. I think it helps you when you get to the real life and start working full time, because you have that same type of passion that you did when you were competing in wrestling, and you want to accomplish great things in the real world. Then you have to have that same attitude that you had when you were trying to accomplish your wrestling goals as well. Ask questions, learn as much as you can. The people that are there, coaching you, or your family, or even, some of us that graduated, 10 years ago from high school, we want Beachwood Wrestling to succeed, and we want you to, become the best version of yourself, whether it's on the mat or just in your everyday life. And so I reached out to a lot of people. I asked a lot of people questions and asked for advice, and they helped me a lot. So sometimes it can be uncomfortable, but, step out of your comfort zone and ask for some advice if you need it. And, just know you have a big community behind you. I'd say Beachwood does a great job with their wrestlers, and, we just want to help in any way we can. So that's it.
When I was young, I think I showed up to a wrestling practice expecting turnbuckles, and I was watching a lot of WWF at the time, and I had a different thought about what wrestling was. But once I showed up, it was one of those where I had a little bit of natural ability and seemed to really take to the sport. It seemed to be something that I really liked. I was good at it and been doing it for years. When I first came in 2006, it was a relatively smaller team, very good quality. I would say that we were missing out on some of the quantity, but we definitely had really, really good wrestlers with a really high standard of excellence in terms of what they wanted to accomplish. And you had a really good foundation of people like Ryan and Scott Peters, and then you had Coach Iammarino and Chuck Garofalo, and so we just really had a good basis of coaching and a culture that was just really amazing. Oh wow, there's so many great memories. I mean, certainly when you start talking about some of the state titles that we've won, some of the kids that were able to qualify for district tournaments, I would say maybe, even going back to a kid named Alex Dronzek, when he won his state title, that was just a really awesome memory. That was my first state champ, and I was relatively young as a coach, and to have someone that could win a state title that I knew that I had a major impact on them, and it really felt like that was a state title for him, but it was also a state title for me, and so it was pretty amazing. Well, certainly Coach I would definitely be an inspiration in terms of his longevity and just how he could sustain success for decades. But certainly even people like Ryan Peters, that really was there to explain the standard and to hold you to the Beachwood standard, which was pretty high in terms of what the expectation was, what the potential was, and so in terms of an inspiration, I would say obviously Coach I, but certainly Ryan Peters as well. I still, I use him as a sense of sustainability and longevity with coaching. I've been coaching now for about 20 years, and it seems like I've been coaching for a long time, but when I start thinking about the amount of time, energy, and sacrifice that someone like Coach I has put, and so if I ever start to feel sorry for myself, I know that there are people that have outworked me, that have done it for longer, that have done it harder, and that have done it at all levels. Never really the emphasis on the money or the accolades, but just helping out kids and this obligation of being out of district and continuing to offer yourself and to push yourself and to be available. Certainly his accountability and his sacrifice to Beachwood athletics, but ultimately the wrestling program is definitely an inspiration. I was young when I came in here, and I didn't have any kids, and my life was being shaped into what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be, and having people like Coach I and Ryan Peters show me this is what coaching is, this is sort of what the expectations are, and wrestling became my life while I was here. Coaching, it was 100% dialed into it because I didn't have kids, I didn't have a lot of other distractions, and so the standard was high, the opportunity was here, and I would say that my contribution was that I gave everything I could to keep the wrestling program as relevant and as successful as I possibly could. We had pretty good success while I was here, so at least 90% of my best friends are probably people that I have wrestled with or people that I have met through wrestling. I would say, my wife and my family are things because of my opportunities to go to college and wrestle, where I've met my wife, and so the doors that have opened because of wrestling, the opportunities that have been there, the things that I do for fun, the things that I enjoy, really all aspects of my life, wrestling has helped to open up doors and provide a pathway for me. Well, one, it's you get to be a part of an awesome tradition, an awesome program, an awesome culture that has, it's a really remarkable history with people in the district that really do care about you, and a relatively self-contained small district that you have the opportunity to be a part of something special and to really take advantage of that opportunity and to embrace it, and you won't regret it.
I got involved in wrestling because I did karate when I was about 4 or 5 years old, and I was an unruly kid. My parents couldn't really put up with me very much, and my dad was a wrestler growing up, so they entered me into wrestling when I was about 6, and it kind of changed my life after that. Beachwood wrestling was almost my life. I mean, I played football and baseball as well, but wrestling was the team and brothers that I never had before. I grew up wrestling with Ryan Harris, Sammy Gross, David Shapiro, Dronzek, all these state champs, state placers, and even though I was much younger than them, they accepted me onto their team. I was able to practice with them both when I was younger and in middle school. It was just more of a family than it was a team to me. My greatest memory would be my freshman year. We had a very good team. We were in the match to make it to state duels as a team, which we had never done before while I had been here at Beachwood. And we made it to the match to make it to state duels, and we lost by just about a point. But it was honestly such a memorable wrestling meet because we all gave it our all, just came together, realized like what we needed to do to get ourselves to the individual state tournaments, and it kind of was a turning point in our season. Ryan Harris is the one who inspired me. Everybody knows that we're very good friends. Even some people said we looked alike in high school, but he truly inspired me. He got me into the wrestling room every day, made sure that I stayed later than I needed to, got me practicing, working much harder than I ever did before I came to high school. And even though he graduated after my freshman year, he still came back, worked with me, talked to me all the time to make sure that I was able to stick up to the standard that Beachwood had set forth before. Coach I was honestly such a ball of energy always. I mean, everybody knows him in the high school, middle school, not just the wrestling team. Obviously, walking through the halls daily, you get to see him, and it's just, he puts a smile on your face. He coached me in middle school, and like I said, I was an unruly kid and came up through this program, and middle school was when I started to figure it out. So he put me on the path for success, but just the memory of him always being there, committed, no matter what was going on with his life. And I mean, over 50 years of coaching, it's unbelievable what he's been able to do and the impact he's made on all of us. I would describe my contribution as I was a multi-sport athlete. I feel a lot of the athletes that have been state champs played one, maybe focused on just wrestling or one other sport, but I played 3 sports. So I was able to kind of show people that you're able to do more than just one. People saw that, okay, I can go out for this wrestling team, learn how to become disciplined, get myself in shape, and it's going to affect me and make me a better teammate, better player in all these other sports that we have to offer. Wrestling definitely has affected my personal and professional life dramatically. As I said, I was not the best kid growing up, and really just shaped my work ethic, got me to be very disciplined in everything I do, so able to wake up in the morning, work out, go to work, and still enjoy my social life afterwards. That kind of set me straight, made sure that I honestly keep up with all the people that I've met, and it's just honestly kind of made me the person I am overall. I don't think I'd be where I am today professionally and have the strong network and friends that I've made throughout the years doing it. The best advice I could give to future Bison wrestlers is take practice seriously. Show up every day, give it your all, because if you do that, you're going to see yourself gain things that you've never imagined you could, both on and off the mat, and you'll also be able to just perform better, and you'll see a change in your lifestyle overall.
My brother started when he was 6 years old, so I was brought into it at a very young age. I started at kindergarten and did it ever since then. It was kind of the epitome. They had state champs every year, sending a team to states every year. It was the standard. When I was in high school, didn't quite have exactly that, but we had a good group of guys who liked to have fun, and that was what was really important. My senior year, towards the end, we had moved up to Division II. The postseason was a lot harder, and I was able to make the district tournament. I didn't make it to states, but I was just kind of proud of myself because I knew it was going to be an uphill battle. Probably my brother, I'd say. Felt like, he was the one that I kind of owed it all to. He was pretty significant. He made me a much tougher wrestler. I mean, one thing I always remember about him was even in middle school, in his, mid-70s, he was just still tough as a bull. You could push him all you wanted, he wouldn't move. Whenever we'd wrestle, he'd just kind of slap you. He'd be kind of tough. You'd kind of get bruises on you after, even as a 70-year-old man. And he really did tough me up a little bit. And he always said it how it was. He wouldn't sugarcoat anything. He was a tough guy. I hope, I think everyone I've wrestled with is gone now, but I hope they, still thought of me as a good captain, hopefully a funny guy, someone who kind of knew how to get stuff done. You'll probably hear this quote throughout what everyone said, but once you wrestle, everything else in life is easy. It's very true, because when I'm in school and I'm working hard, I just think, thank God I'm not, drilling single legs for another hour in the wrestling room. So I think, in that respect, it's made me a very tough person. One thing I wish I could go back and tell myself is don't overthink it. I'm sure every coach I've ever, wrestled for can tell you I overthought everything. Just go in and do it. Don't even think about, don't think 10 weeks ahead. That's all I can say. It sounds simple, but it's very true.
All right, so I have a cousin who's actually on the staff here at Beachwood. He started wrestling before me, and like all boys, I got a family of boys about my age, and most people play football and stuff, and he went out for wrestling. And we would always wrestle in the backyard. One day, Leonard, he put it on me in the backyard. It felt like he knew what he was doing. I was like, dude, you got so much better like in a matter of like one summer. And he was like, you'd never be able to beat me. He was like, because I'm a real wrestler. And when he said that, I was like, oh, you're a real wrestler. He was like, yeah. And he started showing me these little basic moves. And we were really young. You're talking like elementary school. And that's how I got into wrestling. Scott Peters was actually the first person to introduce me to Beachwood wrestling. This room didn't exist. It was kind of like, I think downstairs in the back of the track where they practiced at that time. And I don't know if he was like the head coach then or if he was just involved, because he's been involved probably his whole life. But Scott was actually my introduction to Beachwood wrestling. And then Domenick Iammarino, Coach I, he makes me call him Dominic now, which feels weird, but Coach I actually got to meet him a couple times, but mostly it was afar. And I watched the way he coached his guys and the passion and intensity that he brought. He was so passionate. You got to remember, Coach I's not a really big guy. He's on a like medium, smaller side. Those kids, like, he said it, they did it. And I remember thinking back in the day, how crazy is this? Like, I'd like to coach like that guy, because he was just so motivating and inspirational. I got one selfish one and one unselfish one. Watching my son on that run his senior year, and I know people call it a run, but like I knew it was going to happen. The only thing I was shocked about is that he didn't win the whole thing, to be honest. As weird as this sounds, like, when you watch somebody work and you watch somebody make mistakes and make corrections, watching him and Uzana like in that space was just unbelievable. And it was like zero doubt in either one of their minds or any of the coaches, probably like my number one, like for sure. This is so weird. Your perspective of winning and success and improvement changes, I think. I mean, don't get me wrong, we all want to win championships and stuff like that. Like right before COVID, a few years after I came here, this all happens in one day. So this is going to be crazy. We were having like a optional youth practice. This was like the weekend of, they do a dual state championship. So like, I watched this room. It literally had over 100 little kids in it, all in here. The majority of them go to Beachwood schools, and they're all like working out and stuff. So this is the morning, and the kids were up here warming up to get ready for state duels. And the little kids, you could see how much they were like in awe of those guys. It was a good weekend for the program. We beat like 4 opponents and advanced to the regional final, I guess it's called, before the state meet. I remember that same team was the team that I had when I first got here, and they were terrible. And you're gonna laugh. I said it to the kids, so I don't mind saying it out loud. We were having a preseason meeting. Like, this is in the beginning of that season, leading up to that day. And like I said, the year before, they were terrible. I mean, I've never, it was like the Bad News Bears. It was crazy. I was like, hey, you guys are closer to men than boys, so I don't want to sugarcoat it too much. I want to be honest with you. And they were like, yeah, coach, we want it. I was like, how do you guys think you were last year? And one of the seniors, he was like, we were terrible. I was like, yeah, it was pretty bad. I was like, but you guys have been working really hard. They worked out over the summer. I was like, you're not terrible anymore. Now you're just bad. I said, but we keep this going. We keep working hard, keep sticking to the process. I said, I say by the end of the season, maybe we'll be decent. And we were. I think we won like every dual meet except 1 or 2. We had a kid get a medal at districts. We had like 7 district qualifiers. And we were like on that path to getting to the state meet. Finally it happened. And my sons were in the room at that time. They were in youth and elite. And they were part of those little kids, part of that 100 that were watching those older kids prepare. It's so crazy because a lot of those little kids, my son Caleb, who got on the wall last year, my son Josh, who got on the wall the year previous, and we have this group of freshmen who are all on that team that are coming in this year. And then we got some 8th graders, your cousin Phoenix, Talmadge Bang, and they remember those kids, and they remember them having success. And they brought it up to me recently, and I told them, I said, you guys are so much better than that team was when I met them a year before that. I was like, it's unbelievable. But yeah, so there you go. My first probably big inspiration, and you know I'm from the 1900s, as the kids often remind me. When I watched wrestling back then, it was like ABC Wide World of Sports on like the 3, 5, and 8 channels, like Olympic Time, or VHS tapes. The 84 Olympics, like, you know, they had all these videos of Dan Gable, and he was coaching at that time, and knowing a guy like went undefeated or lost one match in his collegiate career was like unbelievable. And then they show all these videos of him training. And then they showed one of his athletes, a guy named Chris Campbell, who wrestled for Gable, and he was in that Olympics and he got a bronze medal, and he was like almost 30, which was crazy. And then enter the reign of John Smith. So he's a younger guy, he's, you know, flashy and quick, and he was all those things that I aspired to be. So it was like that combination of those 3 guys. And I could name a few more, but those 3 guys all in that one like little 20, 30-minute news segment, like took me down a crazy path of wrestling. So those are my inspirations. So I always tell people, Coach I is like my mentor coach. He very clearly told me, he was like, hey, my years of being at tournaments every weekend, those are over, you know, which I respect and I understand. However, a lot of people don't know this. Probably for my first 5 or 6 years here in the program, I would have coffee at Dunkin' Donuts in Solon with Coach Iammarino and a couple other coaches in the area, and they all get together and have coffee. So like a couple times a week I did that, and I would learn so much from Coach I. It's unbelievable. And once again, COVID kind of slowed all those things down. But I would have coffee with him every morning, and he told me directly he thought I was the guy for this job. It's so hard to like just encapsulate in a sentence, but he literally teaches me how to be a better coach. And he always makes jokes. He was like, oh, you don't listen to what I say. And I laugh because I really do listen to what he says. But sometimes the timing isn't like the way he probably would like it. 3 years ago, he said, and this is so weird, he said, Uzana and Josh will probably be your first state placers, and they both have potential to win it. He was like, it just depends, right? He was like, things have to come together. He was like, and Caleb's gonna be your third. And he said that like 3 years before Caleb even came into high school. Coach, you seem so sure of it. He was like, you could just see it. But he'll always tell me like, oh, watch this kid's gonna be good. Or watch this kid's gonna be good. Even if they're losing, which is the funniest part. Like he'll say that even when a kid's losing. And he'll say it sometimes, he was like, the kid's winning, but he ain't winning because, you know, he's a good wrestler. He's winning because he's bigger or stronger or something like that. But he's mentored me in so many different ways, how to communicate with kids better. Coach I wanna say he's 82 this year, something like that. He can still relate to a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old and connect. Now, don't get me wrong, he's from the area he's from. So from time to time, he could be a little direct, but that also could be just, you know, he's 82, he ain't got time to crap around, right? But he connects with those kids, even at that young age, and then he can connect with the high school kids, and then he can connect with me. You get what I'm saying? Like, he's really good at connecting with people. And I think that's one of the things that made him a great coach. And that's something I've learned from him, connecting with people. It's super important. Like I said, when I got here, it was, you know, and Coach Cimoroni did a great job of him and Dugan setting the stage for the right person, whether it was me or somebody else, come in here and take care of business. And I think one of the things I bring is establish relationships. And that's not just with the kids. It's like navigating the parents and administration, you know, just tirelessly working to make the program. Your uncle, Ryan, helping me improve and helping, by proxy, the program improves. And it's a constant effort. Financially, retention as far as kids advancing through the program, because it's hard for a kid to start wrestling in kindergarten, first grade, and they make it to 9th grade. People don't realize the biggest drop-off is in 7th and 8th grade, and I work in the middle school. So that way I can try to keep the kids that I think love the sport and try to help the kids who don't love the sport navigate the environment, you know. But I think my biggest contribution is my work ethic, and we had 6, 7 kids wrestle at national duels. Some of them aren't even in high school yet. I'm excited for the next few years because all those young kids are coming on in. I always tell the kids, if all you learn from me is a bunch of wrestling moves, I failed. You know, that's not winning. Like, I want kids to win in every area of life, and I think that starts with being a good human being. Like, if I've achieved that with every kid that walks through this room, I feel like, I mean, obviously their parents and other people in their lives, but I feel like that's paramount. It's number one. I need them to be great human beings because I know great human beings have things in common. They help their fellow man. They take care of their families. They want to make sure that they do things the right way instead of trying to cut all corners. And I don't think you have to be a world champ or even a state champ to do that. They become doctors. They become professionals in whatever it is they pursue. And when they do it, I know they're going to do a good job at it because it started out as what? They're great human beings. And then the other side of it is I want them to know what it feels like to win. I don't want it to be like, I'm just big, strong, I came out for wrestling, I pinned 20 people. That's not winning. That's just you being physically better than the other kid in front of you. But I want them to know that they worked for it. Like, because the things that you earn by your own 2 hands are the most valuable to you. I literally just fielded a call from a private school in Pennsylvania who adamantly has a desire to take my younger son. And it's a great place to be as a young person. He was like, Dad, I don't think anybody on the planet's gonna look out for me the way you look out for me. He was like, and I don't think it's unique to me. I think us getting in the car, driving to elite duels, and we had 3 kids from Beachwood going to that event. He was like, you do that for every kid. I don't know if everybody's like that. He was like, I wouldn't take the chance. And I think I can get really good here. I was like, wow, well, thank you, son. That made me happy, because that is how I feel about it. I want every kid to know what earning something feels like and being able to apply just great character and work ethic. Just like I said, being a great human being. I think those things trump everything else at the end of the day. One thing I'd like to say is what a privilege and honor it is to head this program. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a ton of work, but it's a labor of love. And I'm not sure if I'd be in the space I'm in without the support of Domenick Iammarino. Coach I has truly been instrumental in my development as a coach. And like I said, he's taught me so much. And I'm excited to see the Domenick Iammarino wrestling room when it gets unveiled. He truly earned it and truly deserves it. I know this is gonna sound contrary. I don't feel like a kid has to wrestle to get these same things. I think it has to be environmental, and this is the right environment for any kid. Tall, short, skinny, chubby, it doesn't really matter. I think when a kid comes into this room, they're gonna be better emotionally, mentally, physically. They're gonna do things that they never thought they could do before. They're gonna be challenged, they're gonna be pushed, they're gonna be loved. They're gonna know they're loved. They're gonna know that they belong to the team. They're gonna feel good about themselves. And I think it's so funny, a custodian recently said this to me, which I thought was kind of funny, because it was kind of random. Custodian goes, Jimmy, you must be doing something right. I said, why? Like, I was like, they didn't look particularly good today, but sure. And he goes, the kids that graduate keep coming back, and they keep being involved in the program. I think those are the things that a kid would get out of being here.
My dad's obviously the coach, and so I would just always, when my dad was coaching back at Rhodes, I would just always be in the wrestling room and I just hit moves. And one day I told him, I'd like to do this. I think I could beat somebody. I just never stopped after that point. Started competing like 5th grade and just continued on into now. I got to see all the kids who came from Josh Bialosky on, And it was just amazing to be a part of that and have the growth and see how close that Beachwood is and how much Beachwood actually cares about wrestling itself. Just being part of the culture and the team, and honestly the team just being like a family. After my sophomore year, we went to Virginia Beach. Like our whole team went. Everybody had a blast. We had so many wrestlers there, and it really made us like real close together for those next 2 years, which is when we did the most and did the best. Honestly, looking at that wall, I'd say Josh Bialosky, Sammy Gross, Ryan Harris. Like I just knew them, and I saw Sammy wrestle in college a little bit, and then my dad, obviously, and my little brother, and my teammate Uzo. Definitely inspiring. Uzo was always pushing me, my little brother. Just always had to be better so he could do better. Coach I, for me, is someone who I can ask a question. He's like brutally honest. He has a ton of wisdom in the sport. And it was someone who could always tell me the hard things that someone like my dad wouldn't really tell me. Like I remember junior year, I got pinned. Coach I said, don't let it never happen again. And I think I've only been pinned once to date after that point, actually. He's someone who always I could come to for wisdom or a question, whether it was technique about wrestling, the sport, or just the mental aspect of wrestling. He just always tell it to me straight. I made maybe a small impact. I think the smallest impact I made was being in the youth program and actually coming up through into the high school, even though I didn't get to wrestle for the middle school, and just being the first set of people to make it to States in a long time. And hopefully, as continue with my little brother, and hopefully for years to come with the kids who are coming up through the middle school and into high school now, and hopefully they all just see it's very possible. They see me go from the guy who was with them to the person who did it. So hopefully that just starts a big bang, and now we got kids placing every year. Wrestling is a very personal sport, and it always has helped me to be more personal with people, like making first impressions and things like that, and building relationships with people all across time. Like Coach Cimoroni was someone who's also built a relationship through wrestling, and he's also helped me a little bit because I wanted to go in business for a while, and I kind of still will be a little bit, but he's helped me with that aspect to it, and wrestling's always helped me just to keep my head straight and knowing that it can't be worse than cutting 20 pounds. Never stop wrestling, and have fun doing the sport. Wrestle during the summer. And if you play other sports, you don't have to commit to it, and have fun, and it's just a sport. Don't take it too seriously. It's not the end of the world.
Well, my uncle, Tony DiCarlo, was a wrestling coach at John Carroll University, and at an early age, I didn't have wrestling in middle school, and he did wrestling camps at Lake Erie College, and he basically got me interested in that way, and so I started to attend his camps at Lake Erie College, and then once I got into high school, I started wrestling in 9th grade. Coach I and myself coached the middle school team, Sammy Gross and Ryan Harris. Basically, we knew that they were young, talented, elite wrestlers, but we had the opportunity of working together, both their 7th and 8th grade year. Both of them were middle school state champions, and then obviously both of them were multiple state champion, multiple state winners. I think Coach I and myself had a lot of fun during those years. We're always on the same page. Well, I'm going to tell you, I've had 2 mentors in my life that been a big influence in my wrestling career. The first one was my uncle, as I mentioned, was the coach at John Carroll University, where after I graduated from high school, I attended John Carroll University, wrestled for my uncle for a short time, and then probably my junior year, Coach I sought after me at John Carroll, basically remembering me from when I competed here at the Beachwood Sectionals for Painesville Harvey. He was the coach at Beachwood High School, and I was in awe of the Beachwood wrestling program, and he asked me if I'd be interested in helping coach at Beachwood. So I started out at the middle school level coaching and served as an assistant a couple years with Coach I, and we've been longtime friends. Working with Domenick has been unbelievable. Talk about somebody who's come to Beachwood High School for 60 years. How many doors has he gone through? How many doors has he opened for other athletes? We coach together, we're on the same page. Usually after a middle school match on Wednesday, you'll catch us at Tasty Pizza, one of Coach I's favorite places, and just rehashing over what happened during the match. I've learned so much, and I don't think I would be still involved in this sport if it wasn't for Coach I. We talk daily. We see each other on the weekends at coffee. We go to the national tournament together. It's a highlight, you know, and somebody of his age that still has the love for the sport and for what he's done at Beachwood High School. As I said before, I'm in awe of that. He's by the book. He made his kids work hard, and they were successful. I just think that what he's done to the sport of wrestling, he's deserving of this accolade that he's getting, and I'm proud to call him my friend. Well, in this sport, you can't hide, you know. Once you come through these doors and into this room, you have to be willing to work and put in the time and the sacrifice that is needed in order to be successful. So if you look over my shoulder and up there at that wall, those kids put in the time, you know. And every day when I walk in this room and I look up at those names, I would say that for the most part since 1977, I've had an opportunity to watch all of those kids wrestle at one point or another. They mean a lot to this program, they mean a lot to Coach I, and they mean a lot to myself.
Start from the top. How'd you get involved in the sport of wrestling?
That really is a great question. And I was hoping you would ask me that. When I was at Collinwood High School, Cleveland's East Side, way back in the 50s, I played basketball. And I thought I was pretty good. Of course, at 5'4", I wasn't going to be a star. I went for basketball, you know, they didn't know me. And I almost made the varsity, but I was JV. So I played JV basketball, 11th grade. I was a starter. And then, you know, that was it. So I thought 11th grade, I'll be on the basketball team. And the wrestling coach, the old story, said to me, why don't you come out for wrestling? I said, wow. I said, I play basketball. He said, well, if you want to catch splinters in your butt, play basketball. So I went out for wrestling as a senior. But that's the one regret that I wish didn't happen in my life, that I started so late. And so I had 1 year high school of wrestling. I was 17 years old, first time I ever walked on a wrestling mat in my life. I was, for a beginner, pretty good. And really at that time, we were the Senate League, which, you know, some of you don't even know what that is, but it was the best wrestling league going. And I had wrestled the best. I wrestled the defending state champ. He beat me by a point or so. And I thought I was pretty good. You know, that happened that way. And I lost some close matches to good guys who made state. And I was about half and half. And I remember I was in the match to make state, and I lost by a point or so. But you know, that was, to me, later I realized that it was understandable. Then I went to Kent State, and I just wanted to go out for wrestling. I thought I could be pretty good, and I wrestled there all the 4 years. I placed in some tournaments, and actually I was the co-captain my senior year. And I felt my senior year was my year to make nationals. And I fractured the vertebrae in my neck in practice, mid-season. I was undefeated, mid-season. Doctor said, you're done. He said, a little more of that little fracture, and you're going to be in a wheelchair. So that was it. So I graduated 4 years of Kent, and I was in business administration. I was not in education. But some of my friends, teammates, they got teaching and coaching jobs. Wow, I think I could do that. Of course, I wasn't certified. And actually, I got married about 3-4 months after I graduated. Had to work, and the first year we had our first baby. So how could I get certified and do all this, you know? But I went to night school with John Carroll to get certified to teach. It took me 3 years. Night school only, of course, because that's what I had to do. And I did it. I student taught at my old high school, Collinwood, which at that time, that was my life, my goal, but they had no openings. The principal, I remember, he told me, he said, I'd like to have you, but we have people here, we just can't. I thought, well, I'll go back to my job. At John Carroll, I put my application in the placement center. I didn't talk to anybody, just here's my application. And evidently Beachwood called John Carroll, said, do you have anybody that could coach wrestling and teach business? Well, here, call this guy. They did. I lived only 7 miles from Beachwood at that time. I never heard of Beachwood. Of course, I went for an interview 2-3 days later, got the job. And that was in early August. So I got the job right before school started. That was 1965. First wrestling coach. I taught business because that was my major at Kent. So I had a job. I had 2 little youngsters at home, wife and 2 youngsters. I had to work. The kids on the team, some of them wrestled intramural the year before, and the phys ed teacher, who was not a wrestling guy, he brought them out to places, and he helped them. And Bob Bloom and Marty Axel was his name. He passed away recently, actually. They were the 2 kids who had a little wrestling experience. So when I got the job, they were the first leaders and captains of the team. And, 1 year, for the first year, we did okay. We won a few matches. I remember the first dual meet we had, the first match in the history of Beachwood Wrestling. We were invited to go to Kenston High School at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, their whole school assembly, to watch these sacrificial lambs come. Well, that was only their second year as a team at Kenston. So they wanted to build it up. So they had the whole school assembly. I still remember, I take pride in my memory, the first kid who went out there, his name was Mark Bialosky. At that time, it was a 103-pound weight class. And he pinned the kid. I mean, I remember this 58, 60 years later. I had tears in my eyes. And then Barry, I think, won, and I think Marty and Bob Bloom won. I think we won 4 or 5 matches. The next year, we had an all-school assembly at 1 o'clock in the afternoon against Orange, and we won the match. So we were coming on. But it took 5 years for the first kid to make state, and that was Ron Madow. It took time. He lost the semifinals in a close match. He took 5th. Unfortunately, Ron passed away about 10 years ago. The next year, Mark Hawald was state champion. We just all of a sudden were a good team. We were good. And actually, at the first years, there was one division. There was no big school, small school division. It actually broke up when Ron was a senior. And it was combined what they called A and AA. So there were A and AA was one division, and AAA was the big school. And then we took off. We really did. Ricky Stone, Dave Fischer. We took 2-3 kids to state. 78, now my God, that was 12, 13 years after it started. We were then known as a good wrestling team. I remember at the state tournament every year, people, here comes Beachwood, here comes Beachwood. We had 25, 30 kids out for the team those years. We had almost a full JV team. I used to push it, obviously. Talk to kids, signs up, and it worked. And then we started the young kids coming. I think middle school team didn't start probably in mid to late 70s. And we had a teacher down at the middle school. He was a great guy, just a great guy who didn't know much about wrestling, but he was a great guy, which people don't realize that's almost as important as knowing the sport. Being a person who can relate, kids like them, he respects kids and likes kids. That is so big. Well, this guy did that. Got kids out, we had a good middle school team, then we got a coach there who helped him, who knew the sport, and again, it built. Late 70s, early 80s. We had Dave Sternberg, Tom Weiss. They won the state. Tom lost in overtime to the defending D1 state champ. But then Scott Peters, I think it was 80, don't tell me. Scott was 83. Scott was 83. And if there's one guy who was not state champ, who really had the greatest record of all who weren't state champs, it was Butch Lapsley. Butch took 5th, 3rd, and 2nd. In his last 2 years, he was combined 68-2. Just based on his accomplishments, he was probably the best wrestler who never won state. And then Tommy Weiss and Scott Peters lost in overtime. And I have personal regrets about those matches, like maybe I did something that hurt them. But, you know, we laugh about it today, both Scott and Tommy. But once in a while they say, well, was it my fault? I don't know, but, you know, they were the ones out there. I remember Scott was upset with me because I didn't yell at him before his overtime. Well, yelled means really pumped him up. At the sectional, he had an overtime. We had like a minute between regulation and overtime to talk. And I got on him. You didn't wrestle well, get the heck out there and do it again. And he won, that was the sectional. But I didn't do that at the state tournament. I was calm and cool. He said I should have yelled at him. That's the way it goes. And at the end of 84, I gave it up, end of 84. That was 19 years. We did well. It's hard to explain. We're losing some kids to football, which I understand, but it bugged me. And when I say losing kids, we still had 20, not 28, 30. And I just said, I'm going to give it up. And that was after 19 years coaching here. And I hooked on to John Carroll for 1 year as an assistant coach, which was a great experience. And then the next year, I lived in South Euclid. My children went to Brush High School. My older children went to Brush High School. The athletic director actually called me. He says, why don't you coach here? Wow. I live here. My kids go there. So I did. And that was 7 years. That was pretty good too. After 7 years at Brush, I was an outside guy. I didn't teach there. I always had my teaching job at Beachwood. They had some union things where they really wanted teachers inside the building. And they hired a new football coach who said, I want my guy to come with me. He coaches wrestling too. So I was an outside guy. I was out. And I coached 1 year at Orange. I hooked on there. And then Scott asked me to be one of his assistants, which I did. And that was 94. We took 4 kids to state, I think, and 2 in the finals, who both, took second, Chad Silverstein and Zeid. And then Scott went to Minnesota. I'm still teaching in the school, so I went back for the job. And after some of the administration didn't like it that I had left in the first place, I had a hard time, but I got the job back. I'll give you what I thought was the lowest point in the history of Beachwood Wrestling. When I was coaching at Brush, we had a dual meet, Brush against Richmond Heights. So I go to the dual meet as the Brush coach. And he told me, he said, the coach there at Richmond, he said, during the break, we're going to wrestle Beachwood. I said, what do you mean? How could you have a match during the break? Well, they only have one kid. So we had the break, and they had one match. And Beachwood took one kid to the dual meet. And I remember watching the Richmond Heights kids go out there one at a time, get their hand raised, winning a forfeit. So to me, that was the low point of Beachwood Wrestling. Now then, Pete was with me as an assistant at Brush. I remember he came to my house, we talked in my backyard in South Euclid at the time. He said, I want to take the Beachwood job back. I said, Pete, we're doing pretty well at Brush. Why don't you, so we're doing well. Stay with us. No, and he did the job. He brought it along, obviously with Scott. He brought it back. Mike Goldberg came along. The one year I was at Orange, we had a dual meet against Beachwood. Beachwood beat us. So my record against Beachwood is 0-1. So then after Scott, left, I got the job back, and then we built it up pretty good. Again, well, it was already built from Pete and Scott, but then we built it up, did very well, up to 03 when we were second in state, took 6 kids to state, 2 state champs, 2 seconds, which was really the best record year of all. And then I became an assistant to Carcelli for 1 year, and then middle school, which I still am, except I'm now Chuck Garofalo's assistant. I joke and say I have the lowest possible job, middle school assistant wrestling coach. But I love it. And I joke with Chuck, who's one of my very best friends. Chuck, you make all the money more than me, and I still do all the work, which isn't really true. What surprises me, Maverick, how I could right now just go it off. I mean, I'm proud of myself. I'm not like losing it like Joe Biden did, I think I still have the memory. I could talk all that. And I think without preparing, I just went right through it, I can't say there's one thing favorite because so many great things happened, like the state champions. I can't say, whoa, that was the best match, I sat on a chair for 12 state champions, 12 or 13 runners up. I mean, that's a lot of times being there. And of course, we lost a couple overtimes when I'm sitting in that chair, and we won a couple others like that. But the one state finals that I could probably say sticks out was Michael Linsker. He was a sophomore, and it was obviously good. He had lost to Mike Hurley from Akron St. Vincent St. Mary in the districts, close match, and now he's in the state finals, and he was losing by 4 points with 30 seconds to go. And Mike hit a splato. I have a picture of it on my wall at home. Linsker got the pin with 20 seconds left in the match. So, I mean, the way it ended is the one that sticks out the most. But there's so many. But down by 4 points, losing and lost to the kid the previous week, like chances are he's a loser. But then it happened, And I remember when he had him on his back, there's a picture of me kneeling down, banging the mat. And the referee said, stop, stop, stop. Okay, to talk about the ones who never were the big stars, but I respect them as much as the, quote, big stars. by working hard, being team leaders, and there were a number of them. Somehow they were leaders on the team. One of those, and he passed away too, a couple of years ago, Jeff Tolan. Jeff Tolan never made state. He was the big three at that time were Tolan, Lapsley, and Mike Goldberg. Mike and Lapsley took second in the state. And Tolan never made state. He was the leader of that team. He was the guy they looked up to. So there were guys like that. It's not just the big stars. There were some other quote stars who were, I think, terrible people. No, I'm not saying names. But, you know, guys who were hot dogs or smart alecks, they just happened to be pretty damn good. And they worked. There's guys, you know, a kid who worked and put his heart into it, and there's a number of those. Another name, wow, Ellen Kraus. Ellen Kraus never made state. That was in the 70s, early 70s. Team leader, outstanding guy, bright guy. He didn't make state. Went to college down in Florida. Took pilot lessons in Florida. I don't know if you heard the story. He was in a five-seater, learning how to fly. Plane went down. The other guys died. He survived. I talk and it still chokes me up. I mean, I saw him later, a year later, in a wheelchair, wanted to come to practice. So guys like that who have a big impact on me. I thought about this, and people ask me. To me, there's not much difference. Obviously, you got skill set, maturity. But I could remember yelling as much and stomping as much, getting as happy or sad as much for a kid who may have had a 5-15 record, and now he's winning his match. You know, that's the same. I mean, when I say the same, it's the same as winning the state championship. Of course, it's not as big in the overall picture, but to that kid and to me, sitting in the chair it is. I just had a big argument with a friend of mine. I play softball with the old guys, and I pitch. The other day, we had a one-run lead going to the last inning, and I went out there and we lost the game. And I told my friend, I said, it's the same as Class A for the Guardians. I feel the same way protecting a one-run lead as he does. He laughed, are you crazy? You're talking 65 and over league with nobody watching and millions of people watching Class A. I said, how do I feel? How did I feel? I feel the same way going out there protecting a one-run lead in a crappy little softball game as Mariano Rivera did or Class A did. And that's the same with the kids. That's my comparison. That kid's out there, you cry for that kid. You know, whether it's state championship in front of 16,000 people, when it's the only match left, like it probably was for the overtimes, or I'm coaching a middle school kid with a 5-15 record, who's now going to win. That's coaching. I mean, that's the feeling of it, you know. It does play through your life. If you have faced ups and downs, which you do as a wrestler, not only wins and losses, just every day coming up to that room and practicing, and things go good, things go bad, discipline of being involved in a sport. That plays in later. It's just like you learn it. Damn, I'm a wrestler. I've been through this crap before. I could do it. If you could handle wrestling, you could handle a lot of things in life. There's times I've called on myself as, damn it, okay, I'll deal. And maybe because of wrestling that came into me. I mean, I played sports, but obviously wrestling is it. But we, as wrestling people, think ours is the toughest. When you hear guys like, football, NFL guys who wrestled, who say that, then you get to believe it. LeBron James went to Akron, St. Vincent, St. Mary. I mentioned the name before, Mike Hurley. Mike Hurley had another brother, Ryan Hurley. They were buddies of LeBron James. They were high school buddies. And LeBron used to come watch them. And he made some statements about wrestling. That's crazy. You guys go through a hell of a lot more than I ever do. So there's an example coming from him. These guys in the NFL. As a matter of fact, there's a head coach, might be the Buffalo guy. He was a wrestler, and he brings it up coaching in the NFL, how much tougher it is than what those guys do. Go back to my first years, when we had Madow and Mark Hawald. I had a guy named Arnie Staferstein. Arnie was a gym teacher at Hilltop. Young guy like me. Well, at that time, a young guy like me. That's funny. So Arnie was at Hilltop, and he had wrestled in college. He wrestled at Miami of Ohio. It's pretty good. He won the Mid-American Championship, and he was my assistant because I already had the job. The guy was really good. He brought up kids. That was one of the things. He brought up Dave Fischer, Ricky Stone from Hilltop. He just brought them up, threw them out there with the kids. They were 9, 10, 11 years old. And that started things about the young kids and youth. He only was here for like 2 years, then he moved out of town, so of course he had to go. But that started something. And then Ronnie Madow and Lauren Rabnick, who both have passed on, they were both helping me as assistants, of course, former wrestlers with me. The guys who were here, they know something a little different. It works. The guys have to know their role. And then Chuck came with me here. Now I'm his middle school assistant. And it's just like good people. And that's another thing about the head coach. You have to let those guys be part of it. And not, I do everything, you sit and watch. That doesn't work. It's more than having talent and ability. Now, to be a good wrestler, you need talent, ability. But I've had guys who had, I'll use just a figure, who had 60% talent and were state champs. And I had guys who had 80, 90, 95% talent and didn't make it, even to make state. Why? Because it's more than that. It's the fight, the toughness, the mental discipline, something that I've had discussions with people about this too. We could help kids to have self-confidence, discipline, fight, but I think a lot of that is inbred. That's my belief. They have something that you can't teach. So I looked for that. You got to have some discipline, mental toughness, and I try to play on it. Oh, this kid is tough. Oh my God! He's not going to give in. That's what I look for. And again, I could help it, but I can't totally create it. Relate to people. People are what they are. Some people are quiet. Some people are loudmouths. Some people know when to be loud or when to be quiet. I have a little bit of that natural from my mother, who I think had that. Some people compliment me like, wow, your age, you look pretty good. You're healthy and all that. How? Why? I take care of myself. But I think it's luck. genetic luck. Just lucky. I'm lucky that I still have what I think is the mental capacity. I think I'm lucky I'm not big, overweight guy. It's luck. You know, to say he coached some champions, and of course that's great. I mean, that's what goes on the plaques. But it's more, it's now that I'm old, it's more meaningful when I see a guy from 20 years ago who talks about the little things, you know, how I helped as a kid, you know, not as a wrestler, you know, but who I helped as a person and a kid. Little stories that I get more pleasure out of hearing those now than when you won the big match. About 10 years ago, I was eating breakfast at Bob Evans in Mayfield. And there was a husband and wife sitting near me. I didn't recognize them. They were older, like my age. And all of a sudden, the lady started talking to me and told me I coached their son 20 years ago. So, wow, I remember him, of course, you know, I remember him, of course. And she said, I'm going to call him. I hadn't seen him in 25 years. He lived in the area. She called him. He comes in a restaurant. Now, let me tell you the first thing he said. He said, you know, hi, coach, all that. He said, man, I remember that day you left me when the bus took off and you left me out of Walt's Jesuit. We wrestled a tournament at Walt's Jesuit in midwinter, 0 degrees, 10 inches of snow. We got on a bus to come home. Everybody here? Yeah, we're here, let's go. He was still there. So, oh God, I apologize 25 years later. She said, no, it wasn't your fault, coach, it was his fault, okay? You give it your all, you give it time. And if in the end you realize it's not for you, I get that. I have recommended to kids to quit. And I know some of my guys, probably Ryan and Scott, would say, you fight it out. No, that's too hard on people. Of course, we talk about discipline, you stick it out. Yeah, you try to stick it out, but if you can't, you can't. It's the toughest sport going. That's what I would tell kids. You got to test it. It's not just like, I'm going to be a big star wrestler. You know, I can't say that. You have to go out there and try it, be encouraged, stick it out, yes. Because I've had kids who wanted to quit and obviously maybe tell them, stick it out, and they ended up making state, loving it. So it's a process. I taught business because, you know, that was my certification. And I thought about that too. Business, at the time I was taking it, I didn't think about this, but business is practical, it's reality. You talk about your checking account, you talk about money in the bank, business. You know, it's practical. So that's part of me. I'm a practical person, I think. Another thing, I think I understand kids. How, why? I think somehow it's an inbred thing where I pick up on things of people. Now maybe I'm bragging about myself, but I think I could do a lot of that. So that's one thing as a teacher that I felt I have. And then after 38, 39 years as an actual classroom teacher, I retired as a teacher and became a special education assistant called a paraprofessional. I loved it. And again, I think I understood my role with those kids. So I have 4 children, 3 of the older children and 1 younger. When I say younger, he's 30 years old, but he's younger. And as a matter of fact, yesterday was one of my daughter's birthday, her 55th birthday, and she's the youngest of the 3, my older 3. I've had 2 ladies in my life who are supportive. And as a wrestling coach, it interferes with your family life. And you hear stories, coaches, I gotta retire, spend more time with the family. That's a common expression for a lot of coaches in any sport. I had the support, two ladies in my life, and my children, which is so big when I hear about it and see other coaches who give it up. They give it up because, right or wrong, again, that's what they feel they had to do. I've been lucky all these years. I didn't have to give it up. I still play softball with the old man group. It's an old guy group. But there's some pretty good guys in there. We still yell and scream during the games. And I like music. If I could have another life and not teach and coach, I would like to be an entertainer, a singer, musician. That's crazy. But maybe that's, again, part of my personality. A little showy, I admit. I like music. I listen sometimes Neil Diamond songs. I'm more into lyrics now than I ever was. And I relate to, a lot of it's wrestling. I relate to Neil Diamond's song, The Life of It All, or something like that. Oh, come on. The Story of My Life. Doggone you, Maverick. I listened to that recently, and I hate to think wrestling's the total story of my life, but it's a big damn part of it. I'm a deep, unique guy, Maybe too crazy. Story of my life. Turn the page. I'm turning this page, but there's still pages to go. I remember, and again, this is crazy. When I left Beachwood's job coaching in 1984, having a team meeting the spring of the year, and that's when I told them, I'm just going to give it up. And I remember back then, that's 40 years ago. I actually used the term from that song, then turn the page. I'm going to, because Bob Seger has been around a long time. That might have been one of the hits then, I don't remember that. But I heard it today coming here. And it reminded me of that day, that meeting, and I'm relating to it now. I'm turning the page. It's a big book.